Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Harry dialed Emily's number for the umpteenth time, but to no avail. She didn't answer. She'd promised to let him know when she got there, and not a peep. How could this be? Well, yes, his beloved was never distinguished by neatness and commitment, but in such a situation, he even called the airport. The plane he'd put Emily and her friend on had flown on schedule, landed safely, and after that, both girls had seemed to vanish. Neither one of them answered their cell phones. He didn't want to let his beloved go on this trip. He persuaded her to wait for his vacation and then fly together. But no, alone in a foreign country, because anything could happen. He rushed around the apartment for the second day, dialing Emily's number, then Emily, then her friend, but the answer was silence. Why do you keep looking for the fifth corner? At least go eat a proper meal. His mom called him irritated. How do you not understand? I'm worried. If something happened? The son replied. I see. It happened. The girls went out. What's so surprising? It was their first time out. What have they seen here but their shop? Not to mention their town. Well, they've gone out, and they're right to enjoy themselves. Why do you say that, Mother? Harry was snapping at me. Why should a man be suspected of every mortal sin? Who's talking about sins? I'm talking about going out in the ordinary sense. Sightseeing, swimming, sunbathing. It's all new, it's all different. It's not up to you, and rightly so. Let Emily have her fun. She'll be calmer from now on. They say that he who has not had a good time in his youth will go mad in his old age. Do you want that? Don't you know any other way of things? Does a man have to go out, either in his youth or in his old age? You don't know of any that don't go out at all. Harry was irritated, anxious, and then his mother said such things instead of calming him down. Of course she hadn't liked Emily or Mary either, from the beginning, but that wasn't a reason to talk down to people. I know all about it. I never went out much. I never had time. And I'm not that kind of person, but things happen. Ethan in the front yard, he married his Kathy right out of high school. Everything seemed fine. In 20 years already had a second child, but in 40 she got a rash under her tail and went on a bender so that she forgot her husband and children. It's good that at 40, the children are already adults, but it can be worse. We have such a Clara at work. She told about her sister-in-law. You could listen to stories about Mom's friends and their relatives all day and night, but Harry was sick enough. What did he care about someone's sister-in-law? When his favorite girl disappeared somewhere, and where? In Turkey. They remembered the horror stories they'd heard somewhere about girls who'd been kidnapped and sold into slavery. It was Mary who confused her, dragged her off to some unknown place. In some ways, his mother was right. It was necessary to send this friend away at once, literally forbid to communicate with her. He thought, knowing perfectly well that it was useless to forbid Emily anything. They had met almost a year ago in the store where Emily worked, not in a store, but in a big supermarket. Harry had gone in there to get groceries and saw the girl arranging something else on the shelves. The way she did it, her actions reminded him of some kind of music, as if she were playing a harp, as if she were performing some kind of dance. Every movement was full of such grace, he could hardly take his eyes off the chiseled figure, which was not hidden by the ridiculous uniform. A glance at the face, and he realized he was lost. There are times when a girl's figure is beautiful, but her face is so bad. It can be the other way around, and her face was perfect, at least to Harry. He couldn't pass her by, so he went up to her and said, "How cleverly do you do that?" And he was surprised at his own determination. He'd never tried to meet a girl on the street or in a store. Of course, the girls he had 25 years old, there were, but they were former classmates, fellow students, that is, those with whom to get acquainted specifically was not necessary. Experience. The stranger replied cheerfully, turning to Harry and lighting him up with her smile. "And you live near here, I suppose? I've seen you before." Crazy. She had seen him and even remembered him. How could he have missed her? "Yeah, I used to come into this store a lot." "Yes, I'm in the next block. I come here, but why haven't I seen you?" "That's impossible. You can't be missed." Harry was really impressed. "I'm not always in the store. Sometimes I'm at the cash register, and there's a lot of them." "Emily, stop talking. You'll earn your remarks." Through a woman running past. "Oh, sorry." Harry realized. He took a jar from the shelf, pretended to look at it, and talked to the girl about the goods. "Are you guys so strict around here?" "What time do you work till?" "At 10 I finish, at 11 I leave, from the other side, and the service entrance." Without looking, said the girl, and turned around again, suddenly winked with a slightly slanted green eye. "We really can't talk during work. I'll meet you," said Harry. Tossed the can into the basket and headed for the checkout. "Emily, then, is my one and only." He thought and had no other thoughts. It was only 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but he was ready to take a watch at the service exit, or better yet, to stand there in the store, watching Emily, guarding her from other men's gazes. But he had to take the groceries home, and it was ridiculous to be on the street or in the store in case they took him for a thief and Emily for a fool. No, he's an adult. He should behave like a grown-up, serious man. At home, Mom, sorting out the shopping, was surprised. "Where are the carrots? He didn't buy any greens. What's the butter for?" "We have it. I'd asked you to buy chicken, but you bought some half-finished products. What should I do with them?" "You didn't buy rice either. And why did you buy sprat and tomato?" Twirling the same can in her hands, the woman was annoyed. "What am I going to make dinner out of?" "Your sprat." "Mom, I really like sprat and tomato. Today I'll eat it for lunch. I don't need anything else." "I'm sorry. Do you want me to go again? For the chicken and everything else?" "No, thanks. Sending you is a waste of time. I gave you the list. You're so stupid." But Harry wasn't listening. He went to his room and threw himself on the couch, holding the jar in his hands, which were touching Emily's hand, and lay there with a blissful smile, waiting for the time to pass. Peeking in the door, Mom, of course, guessed it. It was clear. He's in love. "And what kind of sprat do you like?" "Tell me, please. Not a sprat, Mom, but the best girl. I'll introduce you soon, and soon we'll be married." That's how it is, and send them to the store, and instead of buying everything on the list, they will fall in love with a sprat and lie with it in their arms. The woman grumbled and went to the kitchen. Miranda, not that she was very worried about this behavior of her son. A grown man, what can I say? It was high time he fell in love and got married. But what kind of sweetheart did he find at the store? That store-bought dating never does any good. A friend of mine went to the store, and a man saw her, and they got married. How many years has he been tormented with her? And by the way, she's got a bride for her son, Abigail. A wonderful girl, beautiful and smart, a co-worker's daughter. Miranda's known her since she was a kid, just like the rest of the family, lovely family. But no, he went to this store, and who knows how this acquaintance will turn out. And it turned out that Harry met Emily after work. Alas, she did not come out alone, but with her friend, Mary, who was probably a pretty girl too, but who disliked him because she prevented him and Emily from really getting to know each other. But Mary apparently felt it was unnecessary and quickly left them alone together. "And thank you for that. You must be tired," Harry asked, introducing himself. "No, I'm very energetic," she answered cheerfully. "And anyway, let's be on a first-name basis. We're not at a reception." The girl's cheerful mood relaxed Harry, and together they walked to her house, chatting casually. The young man learned that Emily, like her friend, came from a small town. They wanted to enter somewhere, but failed, so they had to get a job in a store. "We didn't want to go home with nothing, but we didn't want to go home at all. There's nothing much to do there. We want to achieve something more, so in a year we'll probably prepare better and go to school. Or we'll figure something else out. We're not going to put the cans away until we retire. And we live in this house. We're renting a 2-person apartment on the 2nd floor. You see Mary's home. Why don't you come in?" "Harry, I'd love to come in, but Mary's there, and she's a chatty girl, so we can't be alone together." He didn't want to be alone with Emily, but he didn't think of anything intimate. No, he just wanted to be near her, to talk about everything, to learn more and more about her. "Why don't we go and just sit somewhere?" Harry suggested. "I'm coming from work, and I need to get changed and clean up, and then it'll be too late, because I'm working tomorrow. But the day after tomorrow I'm off, then we'll go out, okay?" So they began to meet on weekends, and when Emily worked, Harry, who worked until 6, met her in the evenings from work, always with flowers with some small but nice gift. Soon the guy already on Emily's rights, as a young man, unashamedly visited their rented apartment with Mary, and the girl herself invited to his place. Emily's acquaintance with Miranda also took place. Oh, the potential mother-in-law didn't like her son's girlfriend, and not because she had another bride in mind for Harry. Not because Emily had any conspicuous flaws. She just didn't like it, and that was all, but the woman didn't express her complaints to her son. On the contrary, she praised the girl both in her eyes and behind her eyes, in conversation with Harry and her friends. "Wonderful girl, and beautiful and modest, lives far from home, and does not hang around. Behaves decently, works officially, well, just fine. She still found one physical flaw in her favorite son, but she told not him about it, but her friend on the phone." Harry overheard his mom saying, "Yes, she is beautiful, but I look at people's hands first of all, and they are not beautiful. The palm is wide, the fingers are thick, short, some kind of claws, not hands." Harry heard him, but only grinned. He didn't think Emily's hands were ugly, but rather childlike, touching. Miranda did not give up trying to change her son's mind, but decided to act stealthily. She praised her son's choice and admired the girl's beauty, but she kept telling stories about her sons, allegedly her friends and coworkers. "Vanessa, what's going on at home? Her son was so clever and handsome, but he married a guest from some village. She had a baby, and then she got a divorce. Now she wants to take half the apartment from them, and she was such a nice girl, such a sweetheart." Harry was well aware of the implication. "Mother, Emily, and I haven't married yet. We haven't had children, so we're not going to divorce. Besides, she's not from the country, but from the city, a resort, by the way, where any apartment is more expensive than ours. I'm not saying anything about your Emily. I'm just telling you about what's going on at work. You and I have to talk about something. But what do we talk about? Not soccer, especially since you're not interested in it, but you could be interested in your beloved's relatives. That's very important too. How is it important? How could I possibly be interested in her relatives?" Harry was both amused and annoyed by such talk, but Emma wasn't interested either. She married someone who didn't remember her kinship, and now she's been offered a good job, and there are questionnaires and checks. and it turns out that this husband's entire family has been in prison 5 times, and now Emma will not see a good job. How's that for a turnaround? I don't like these turns. Emily had no one in jail, and she herself had no jail time, no lawsuits, and no apartments taken away from anyone. Leave me alone with your friends and their kids. Harry was already angry, in fact, and he didn't know much about his beloved's parents. He just wasn't interested. From her fragmentary phrases, he realized that her relations with her parents were rather complicated, and that upset the girl, and if that was so, then why bother with questions? As if they had nothing else to talk about still, as it was. Every meeting with Emily was a real holiday. She was so positive, so cheerful, so able to lift his spirits. If Harry feared anything, it was that someone would intercept. He had such happiness. Still, she works among people, every day in front of many men, but Emily did not give any reason for jealousy. On the contrary, it seemed that she was afraid of losing her boyfriend. This really raised the self-esteem of the young man, who had never considered himself such a dream for any girl. He wasn't trying to bribe the girl, to pay her financially for her attention, not at all. He saw that Emily was not the least bit self-serving. Yes, he was a well-to-do man, earning good money, but he had never heard the slightest hint of even the most trifling gifts from Emily. He himself was happy to give her gifts, genuinely pleased with her admiration and gratitude. Harry himself did not notice that his savings began to melt like sugar in boiling water. He did not skimp on expensive clothes for his beloved, nor on jewelry. When by Christmas the guy wanted to please Emily with a new branded handbag, and of course, not an empty one, he, after counting the money, realized that there was simply not enough money for a model worthy of his beloved. He had to turn to Miranda. "Mammy, can you lend me some money for a while?" "What's wrong?" The mother was even frightened when she heard the amount of money she was talking about. "You used to have money, didn't you?" "Where did it go?" "I had some and it surfaced, but I'll have more soon. Don't worry, I'll close a lucrative project soon." "Then what?" "Your Emily will be back, sucking you dry like a vacuum cleaner." "Mom, don't. Emily has never asked me for a dime. If you're sorry, don't give it to me. I'll find someone else to borrow it from, but it's not worth it to slander someone for nothing." "I'll give you the money." "I'll give you the money, of course, but think what you're doing. You are going to get married." "With what money?" "You'll have to buy everything for the bride and the celebration itself. The wedding will be in the spring. I'll still have time to earn so much." "Don't worry, please. I've never robbed you." Yes, they planned the wedding for spring, because they had not yet applied for it, and there was no engagement, but Harry was already sure that he would get the consent, and the ring for that day had already been bought. It had cost a lot of money, but he couldn't tell his mother about it. Christmas was celebrated, and Emily was delighted with the gift. At the end of February, Harry finally proposed to her, got her consent, and very soon after this momentous event, Emily said that she was terribly tired of winter, frost, eternal darkness, and wanted to rest in Turkey. Harry was surprised at this statement. "How come without me?" "I have a vacation in April, and we planned the wedding for April. Then we'd go on a wedding trip together." "How are you going to go alone?" "Why alone? With Mary, she's on vacation too. Can you trust her with me? We're going for a couple of weeks, so we'll make it a honeymoon trip, like a bachelorette party or something." "I don't know what you're worried about." "You don't trust me, do you?" "Why wouldn't I trust you?" "I'm just scared for you. I don't know what's going on. But isn't it true that sometimes these things happen to single girls?" "No, I'm not letting you go. Let Mary go alone if she wants to." "What are you talking about?" Anything can happen at home, and the ceiling can fall on your head. For the first time since we met, Emily sounded annoyed. And anyway, I'm not asking your permission. I'm informing you. That's why I'm going now, before we get married. Otherwise, as soon as I become a wife, you won't let me go anywhere. Mary's already gone to get a trip, and now you're starting all of a sudden. You want to hurt my feelings before you leave. Harry didn't want that at all, and realizing that his beloved was going anyway, he decided that he shouldn't spoil her vacation. She was really tired, exhausted for the winter. Let her rest, sunbathe, gain strength and new impressions. And now Emily and Mary had gone away, and for the third day there was no news from them. How can this be? I mean, she knows I'm worried. At least send me a text to say everything's okay. I don't need anything else. If she comes, I'll give her a hard time. What if she doesn't? After a week of not knowing, Harry decided that something should be done because 2 people were missing. But first he decided to go to Emily's work. Maybe some bad news had gotten there that hadn't reached him for some reason. There, in the personnel department, he was given some strange information. On vacation? No, they both quit their jobs, got full pay, said they weren't coming back. I'm surprised you don't know. You're Emily's fiancé, aren't you? I must have misunderstood something, Harry muttered, and went to the house where the girls rented an apartment. The door was open, and some people were dragging tools and materials into the apartment. They were the owners, who said that Mary and Emily had paid them off and had moved out. And who are you to them? The landlady, an elderly woman, asked. No one, an acquaintance, Harry replied. He realized that he really became, or maybe he was his Emily, a nobody. His mother, seeing her son's suffering, at first seemed to sympathize, comforted him, said that if something had happened, he would have been informed long ago, and then began to laugh. Well, has your sprat gone to the warm seas? Oh, son, I told you that these store acquaintances do not lead to anything good. I've been sitting on your neck for almost a year, pulling from you. All right, she didn't. You gave her gifts, and you gave her not a trifle. You dressed her, put her shoes on, hung her with gold. Who would refuse? You never gave your mother a silver ring in your whole life? Come on, I'm not scolding. You'd better keep quiet. My son was losing it. Don't rub it in. Something must have happened. I think she found a richer patron, that's all. Maybe she went to her village, or where she's from. Maybe she lives in the next street. When you meet her with another man on her arm, then you can ask her what's going on. And I don't put salt on it, I put green oil on it. It'll sting at first, but it'll heal your soul wound quicker. Harry understood that his mother was right in some respects. He really knew nothing about his beloved and the one he wanted to tie his life with. Where was she from? Where were her relatives? Although if he had known, what would have changed? Well, he would have come, saw that she was not there, so what? Even if I had met her, I would have heard an indifferent answer. Would that make it any easier? What can you do? You have to move on. Miranda didn't hide her joy at the disappearance of her unwanted daughter-in-law. Cheer up, son. It's certainly a godsend. It would be much worse if you got married, had children, and she disappeared. And so, well, a year wasted and all right, forget it and wait for your happiness. It will not pass by. It was a little inspiring. Except that at the word happiness, Emily's sweet face came to mind, her cheerful laughter. Would he never see her again, his dear bride? Who could replace this girl? Who could not be better? And then my mother had a birthday, not an anniversary, because she immediately said that she would not organize a big party. Only her sister and her husband, her late father, her brother and his wife, and a couple of friends. And you and me, just 8 people, nothing special. We'll sit for a while and that's all, just to meet. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Instead of a couple of friends, only one came, but with her daughter, Abigail. Harry was already a little familiar with this girl. That is, his mom persistently wanted him to meet, and preferably marry, her daughter's girlfriend. He liked her a little, but not enough to marry her, and compared to Emily, Abigail was a loser, though she wasn't a bad-looking girl. She was very pretty, but her pretty head with its doll's face, its baby face, was crowned by a too fat body. Yes, she was such a nice fat girl, simple-minded, trusting, very homely. It is said of such people from childhood that they will be good masters, but did Harry need that? He needed Emily, fun, quick, unpredictable, and loving. And this Abigail, what? Yes, a good hostess. She's probably good at making soup. But loving? No, she hardly knows what that is. At table, of course, he was seated next to Abigail, told to look after her, and Harry dutifully offered her various dishes, served her bread, napkins. He did not know what to talk to her about, so they said nothing to each other except thank you and please. Then the men decided to go out on the balcony to smoke, and Abigail's mother suddenly jerked, obviously pushing her daughter under the table with her foot and making some significant grimaces. Abigail realized, "Oh, Miranda, I'm so grateful to you. Such a lovely evening, but I have a headache. Mom, should I go home?" "I wanted to talk more. What's your hurry?" Her mother was upset. "I can walk home alone. It's not far. It's late. It's getting dark. So I'll walk. I'd love to walk too," said Harry. He and Abigail went out of the house. He was about to go to his car, but the girl held him back. "Don't. You've been drinking." "I'd love to walk. It's such a beautiful evening. I'd love to get some air." And her hand slipped under the young man's elbow. "I'd love to walk too." Harry smiled, looking at that hand, unexpectedly very beautiful, white, with smooth skin, long, thin fingers and sharp, manicured nails, not at all like Emily, but Abigail was the opposite of his favorite. Well, if Emily was Emily, why not Abigail? We should get married anyway. It's high time she got married. Our mothers have married us off long ago, and we shall be a decent couple, and what's the matter? I've had love before, and I'll never have anything like that. It was uncomfortable to keep silent, so he decided to talk to Abigail a little. "You're probably just tired of sitting at this boring party, among people who are not old?" he asked with a smile. "Why not?" Abigail replied eagerly. "Your mother organized everything so well, and it's not so old that it's boring. It's just that I've got a bit of a headache." "Do you do anything fun without your mom? You know, companies, friends, clubs," and immediately regretted his question. It's clear that Abigail is a homebody. "What kind of clubs?" And indeed, the girl mixed. "Well, with friends occasionally sit somewhere, although no, that I will lie. Not really. I go somewhere and with someone to have fun, but I do not need it and do not need. I love my home. I love to read, watch movies, do crafts. I'm boring, aren't I?" "Why not?" Harry exclaimed quite sincerely. "Not at all. You're the right Abigail, the right kind of woman for life, for happiness, for family. I suppose that's what a woman should be. It would be worse if you were 25 and running around dancing. I'm already 26. Abigail sighed. "And no family. Maybe because I didn't go dancing, where would I have met? I work in a women's collective at school. At the institute there were mostly girls. They are all married already, have children, so with me they have no time to meet and no need. But sometimes I'm jealous." The girl spoke without a tear, without any bitterness, just telling me. Harry thought that she was not capable of strong emotions, and perhaps that was her good fortune. It's just that my mom keeps trying to fix me up. Abigail grinned. Here's to you too. I realize my mom's been hinting for a while that you'd be a better choice. Why don't we just humor our moms and get married? I said it and I was scared. What if she said yes? No, I mean, she's a good girl. Maybe she's the best option, but what if Emily comes back? Abigail, as if reading his thoughts, grinned. Aren't you afraid I'll say yes? I'm not going to say no, but I don't want to do it on the fly. I need to think about it, to talk, to get to know each other a little. Isn't that right? And if you change your mind tonight, I won't remind you, don't worry. I'll just consider it a joke. Here's my house. I'm not inviting you over. I'll come back later, okay? In the meantime, you can call me if you want to talk. You're right, Abigail. You're so right. I'll definitely call, and we'll talk about everything else. Obviously, we're not going to register the marriage right away. That was the end of it. Harry did not go home at once. He decided to take a walk along the street, to wait for the guests to leave, to avoid questions, hints, and advice from older companions who had lived their lives and knew better. It was better to walk alone, to think without interference. About whom? About Emily, of course. He forgot about Abigail as soon as he said goodbye to her. He thought about his missing lover all the time and was horrified that Emily herself would never know, nor would she want to know how he'd lived all those months. And he'd lived like that, thinking about her all the time. Not about why or where she'd disappeared to, but just so he wouldn't see her, no matter who he talked to. His first thought was always to tell Emily. And now, too, as if he saw her in front of him and asked her mentally, "You'll come back and I'll be married. What then?" And she seemed to answer, laughing, "What's what? You'll be divorced, that's what." He came home when the guests had gone, and his mother was doing the dishes, and when she heard her son open the door, she came running out of the kitchen, asking him questions. "What took you so long, Harry? Did you see Abigail off? What did they talk about? Did you go to their house? I saw Abigail off. We talked about personal things, but I didn't go to her place." Harry gave a short report. "Oh, well, what did we talk about? Why can't you say a word to your mother? Miranda was upset. I'm curious. I've been dreaming about it for so long. What is it? What were we supposed to agree on in half an hour?" "We just talked, agreed that we'd call each other, and then we'd see. We haven't planned a wedding yet. It's a little early, isn't it?" "Well, of course, we should talk first. Although he's not young anymore, it's about time. Don't take too long. To be honest, I dream about it day and night, about your wedding. You will live with us. We have a bigger apartment." Miranda began to outline her plans. "Mom, no one's thinking about getting married yet. What are you talking about? I don't understand." Harry really didn't understand why his mother was so eager to marry him. It was quite simple. "Or are you waiting for that sprat of yours? Well, I'm afraid the devils will bring it, and they will. Who needs it in the Emirates, or wherever it is? They're gonna get mad, and they're gonna kick your Emily out. And tell me, son dear, will you really accept her after all this? Don't you have any self-respect? I won't let her on my doorstep, and I'll bequeath this apartment to my nephews." "No, Mom, that's impossible. Why are you running ahead of the locomotive? No one gets married, no one comes back, no one dies. And you." And so they went to their rooms dissatisfied with each other. But from that day on, Harry and Abigail began to see each other quite often. At first, it was the young man who took the initiative. He realized that it would be difficult for Abigail to be the first to call, to invite to meetings, and without it all communication could stall. But for some reason he didn't want that, because it was interesting to communicate with Abigail, and in general, it was calm and reliable with her. They spent the summer beautifully, going to the country on weekends, swimming and sunbathing, picking berries, talking about everything in the world. Abigail didn't have to think about where to find money for another gift or some expensive entertainment. She didn't like restaurants or clubs. Everything was simple, homely, and Harry felt that was exactly what he was missing. Then Miranda announced that it was Abigail's mom's birthday, and they should definitely go. Harry didn't think of refusing, especially since he had his own views on the day. He figured that if it wasn't Emily, who cared who was around? Abigail was not the worst option. He'd bought a ring beforehand, certainly not as fancy and expensive as the one he'd gotten for Emily, but not because he didn't think Abigail was worthy. He just realized that money should be saved, and in the middle of the celebration he asked for the floor, got down on his knee, and asked Abigail to become his wife. To the applause and joyful tears of both moms, the consent was received. The wedding was performed, and they began to live together in Harry and Miranda's apartment. The mother gave the young couple 2 rooms, and she herself took the smallest. There was no adjustment of character between the young people. From the first day, they began to live peacefully and quietly, as if they had been married long ago and knew everything about each other. "I can't get enough of you." I was Miranda. "All my acquaintances complain about their children and daughters-in-law. They have one thing wrong or another. But you are just like Dobes. We are like old landlords, all the talk about what to buy, what to cook, but at best, what movie to watch in the evening, and we are not even 30 yet. How many years to live like this, from breakfast to dinner, from work to home, from home to work? Yes, you can call it stability, but you can also call it green longing. Saved from this routine, memories of her, of Emily, with her would be a completely different life. Soon, and in the measured existence of the young family, came a change. Abigail announced that she was pregnant. This was a great joy, but also a source of great anxiety for everyone, both for the future parents and grandmothers, especially since the pregnancy was quite complicated, and at the ultrasound it turned out that Abigail was carrying twins. It was a happy expectation of a miracle. 2 new people were to appear in the world at once. Harry felt truly happy for the first time in a long time, an established adult man. He loved his Abigail, who had given him such happiness, and was prepared to give him 2 children. And then the children were born, a boy and a girl. While Abigail and the children were in the maternity hospital, the relatives were choosing names. For some reason, everyone was expecting 2 boys, but now they had to think of a name for a girl. They thought it would be Ethan and John. "Why don't we make her Kathy?" "Oh no, my grandmother was Kathy. Very hard luck. How about Lucy?" Miranda suggested. "No, I don't like it. It's a heavy name. Lucy has a difficult personality." "How about Lisa?" "Well, you're the dad. Why don't you say something?" suggested. "We went to Harry." He almost said the only woman's name dear to him, Emily, but he bit his tongue in time. As a result, the children were named Jordan and Olivia. Beautiful names, wonderful children. The choice of names, the purchase of the children's dowry, the equipment of the nursery, in all this Harry took a very active part. I feel like the father of the family. And then, finally, Abigail and the children were discharged, and his role was suddenly the last. Life revolved around the twins, who needed a lot of attention. No one had time for the father of the family. No, Harry, an adult and sensible man, was far from resenting his wife, and even less jealous of her children. It was just that life had changed unrecognizably. Now he cooked his own breakfast in the morning. His wife slept, exhausted after a sleepless night with the children. Gone were the morning conversations, which, as it turned out, set the tone for the coming day. Gone were the family lunches, the mainstay of their life together, the dinners that relieved the day's tension. What was? There was this. Your shirt. Look in the closet. No? Well, wear the same one you wore yesterday. It's clean. You eat in the kitchen. There's something in the pot. Heat it yourself. I have to feed the kids. You're finally here. Why are you so late from work? I have to go to the clinic with the kids. Don't take your shoes off. Let's go together. And so on. Somehow I coughed. My wife and mother got worried. How did they freak out? Not at all like before. Here's a thermometer. Drink some decoction. Take some mixtures. Put on warm socks. No, not at all. Abigail was worried in a different way. Do you have a cold? Oh, stay away. Don't go past the nursery. Go to the bedroom and stay there. I won't come in, I'm sorry. I don't want the kids to get sick. Even without a cold, he was afraid to go near the children. God forbid you breathe out some adult germ on them. So that's it. He became an extra in his family. Not to talk to someone, not just sit next to someone and like to reproach no one. What else was missing? Not to complain that his wife gives too much time to the children, but it was dreary and lonely. The vacation was approaching, and Harry realized that it did not please him at all. Not having to go to work would be a joy, would it? At work, at least among people you can talk and joke. But at home, what? No one, in fact, does not refuse to communicate. They ask questions, are interested, but so out of politeness. They don't listen to the answers until the end, or run away to the children. The main thing was to see her, to hug her at least once more, and having given his friend his consent, he began to pack. The first thing to do was to report back home. Harry didn't worry much about how Abigail would react to his message. He suspected she wouldn't. Maybe she would be relieved. He decided not to delay the conversation, especially since he was leaving soon. In the evening, when the children were asleep in their room and Abigail was ironing the children's clothes in the kitchen, he asked her bluntly, Abigail, do you think I should go on vacation for a couple of weeks? Would you be okay with that? Abigail, not raising her eyes from the delicate rags she was stacking, said a little surprised, What's there to be offended about? You're on vacation, and you and I can't go yet. Go, of course. Where are you going? To Turkey. A coworker offered a trip for half price. It won't be too hard on the family budget. All the more reason. Go, of course, I'm not going to object. And Abigail, smiling brightly, looked at her husband. How do you know? If she had cried, rebuked him, discouraged him, resented him, maybe Harry would have refused. He loved Abigail and the children, and he didn't want to cause them any trouble. But if his departure wouldn't upset anyone, why not go? As it turned out, it would upset and alarm someone. Miranda heard the conversation between husband and wife. She did not interfere at once, did not comment on what was going on, but later she came upon her son. What are you up to, Harry? Furiously, she whispered to her son. What turkey? Abigail, so here to kill, and you go to warm your belly? But you two are here, and your mother comes almost every day. I don't have to do anything, and I'm really tired. When the children are older, I'll let Abigail go on vacation alone, and we'll manage here, won't we? You will, yes, even though you're not familiar with your own children now. Anyway, don't avert your eyes like I don't know why you want to go to Turkey. Didn't you get a message? But that's too much. I didn't get any news, Mother, and don't make up nonsense. Let's say Emily is in Turkey, but where in Turkey? I have no idea. You think I'm going to run all over the country looking for her? You would, and I assure you, it's a small world. So you have my word. Don't go anywhere, stay home with your wife and kids. What kind of vacations are vacations when the kids are small? It won't end well, you won't find Sprat, and you'll lose your family. Abigail, of course, is quiet, patient, but no patience is unlimited. His mother's words had no effect on Harry's decision. He still went on vacation with a friend. Yes, his mother was right. He had hoped to meet Emily, although he did not believe that it was possible. But the truth was for Miranda. The world was too small. When he checked into the hotel, Harry saw a girl of familiar appearance behind the desk. It wasn't Emily, but the face looked familiar, and he realized it was Mary, the friend his sweetheart had left with. He rushed to her, hoping to find out about Emily, but when she came to the counter, Harry couldn't resist. "Emily, is that you?" With joy and anguish, he said, approaching the girl. "Your papers." With a professional smile, said Emily, holding out her hand for his ticket, and with the same smile, without looking at him, said, as if continuing the business conversation, "You can't come here. Come here in 3 hours. I'll finish, then we'll talk." Everything was just as it was then, 3 years ago. Gasping with happiness, thought Harry, going to his room. And she was still as beautiful, light, cheerful, and loved to tears. Thoughts of Abigail, his mother, his children were gone. It was as if they did not exist in his life, as if he and Emily had parted recently, without having time to change something in their lives. The next 3 hours lasted endlessly. His companion tried to find out something, but Harry answered in vain, and he went to the beach alone, having achieved nothing. Harry, long before the appointed time, was already standing at the service exit, keeping his eyes on the door from which Emily was to appear. She came out, saw Harry, and flashed him her unique smile. Harry went up to the girl and put his arm around her. "Emily, darling, how I've missed you. How I missed you." The girl hugged him too. "I was always thinking about you," she whispered. Their embrace was not passionate or strong. It did not feel the heaviness of their bodies, as if two souls met in space and merged with each other. So they stood side by side in silence, as if conversing with thoughts and feelings. Then they separated. They looked into each other's eyes. "Why don't we go to a restaurant?" Harry suggested. "I don't care about restaurants." The girl dismissed him. "Let's go to your room, order dinner there." They ordered dinner and the next morning breakfast. They were so happy together that there was no time left even for the clarification of relations. Harry didn't want to disturb the union of souls by asking what had happened, why Emily hadn't come back, what she had been doing all this time. She hadn't asked much either, hadn't reacted in any way to the news of his marriage. Harry felt guilty himself. He tried to justify himself. "You were gone and I didn't care about anything. They told me to get married, so I did. How do you want me to come back now? You're married, you have kids, but divorce is still a thing." "Yeah, you know, it's the wife. She's so indifferent. I don't think she'll be upset. A divorce is a divorce. What's the big deal?" "What about the kids? I'll pay child support. I've been promoted. I think we'll have enough money to live on. Are you coming with me?" "No, it's not that quick. I have a contract. I have to work till the end of the season." "But don't worry, come on. I won't stay long. Think about it. What's there to do here? You think it's good to be alone all the time. Mary and I have already split up. She's got a boyfriend here. We live apart. We don't talk much. Emily, I swear you'll never regret coming back." They spent the whole week together, but when they were going back to the airport, Harry met his friend. "You had a lot of fun, I see," he said with a sneer, either with disapproval or envy. "What kind of a hottie did you get?" Former love? And present and future and forever. Harry replied with a distracted smile. Are you going to go on a date once a year? My friend asked. Why should I? She's coming. She promised to come back to the city. She has a season to finish. She has a contract. Harry explained. What about it? And the fact that you've got a family, you've forgotten about that, haven't you? His voice grew colder and colder. What's family got to do with it? There are such acts of civil law as divorce. Don't you know? Harry was already angry at his neighbor's words. I do, and I know what a pleasure it is to get divorced, but you. Think about it. You've got Abigail the Gold. What about this one? How did she end up in this hotel? Who cares where she works or how she got there? We love each other. She promised she'd come. And Abigail? What can I say? Yes, Abigail, Gold. And that's why I hope everything goes well with her, without too much scandal, without screaming, and without tears. Well, if it does, I feel sorry for Abigail. 2 kids after all, and here. Oh, stop it. What's wrong with you? I don't know. Stop shouting. It'll be all right. It'll be fine. The main thing for me is to get Emily here, and I'll take care of everything else. Everything else can be taken care of. Whatever you say, I don't think anyone's going to talk you out of it. It's up to you. Just you watch when you come to Abigail. Don't tell me that you've met love, about the divorce, all that stuff. Something tells me that such people don't always keep their word. Shook his head, Buddy. Bite your tongue, I beg you. He will keep his word, you'll see. But no matter how strong Harry's confidence in Emily's obligatory arrival was, his friend's words had a grip on his soul. He wondered what would happen if Emily really didn't come. They had called. The girl had said that yes, she was already going. There was a month, a week left to go, but the confidence was shattered. Harry doubted, and every day more and more, he was nervous, lost his appetite, slept badly, irritated, and Abigail as if she didn't notice anything. Her husband said nothing, and she, seeing his condition, offered some drops, decoction to calm his nerves, and only that. She wrote off Harry's mood after the vacation as nervous tension, and she herself was quietly rejoicing at his arrival, telling him about the news, mostly about the children. Sometimes only he caught her testing glance, but he kept silent. Indeed, why upset her before her time? Miranda, on the other hand, could not be deceived. She saw the mood in which her son had returned and guessed the reasons for the change. At first she kept silent, but then, left alone with Harry, she asked him if he had seen his sprat. How is she doing? She's probably coming to visit. Mom, please, whether she's coming or not, whether she's seen or not, let's not talk about it. My son turned away. I'd love to never know anything about her at all, but thanks to you. Anyway, it's up to you. But I beg you not to upset Abigail. After all, she is your wife, your children's mother. You can't change her for this one. Think about it. How are you going to live if you tell Abigail now and break her heart? Remember, I'm on her side, on Abigail's side, and I don't want to know you if you ever mess with that pest again. I ain't gonna break nobody's heart, and I ain't gonna tell nobody nothing. There's nothing to tell, Mom. Stop it, please. It hurts to hear everything you say. Harry was hurt by the fact that no one believed in his beloved, that mate, that Mom. Everyone was sure that Emily wasn't coming, that she had spun around again and given up. And he was sure that she would definitely come. There was nothing left to do but hold back, not saying anything yet to Abigail, who had become even more of a stranger after he'd passed 2 weeks next to the one that seemed to have been made for him. 2 days before the season ended, Emily's phone went silent. She didn't answer calls. She didn't answer texts, and then her phone was disconnected. She disappeared as if those 2 weeks had been some kind of dream, and they were, in fact, a dream. He just went on vacation, just met there the one without whom it is difficult to live, but you can, and you can even happily. His children are growing up. His wife loves him. His mother, however, sometimes looks at him the same testing, and sometimes even mockingly. That's what is funny to her. The fact that the son did not work out with the woman he loved, that's how she knows that it did not work out, because Emily may well show up. Harry argued mentally with those around him. The season had passed, the next season had begun and ended, and there had been no word from his beloved. Life was gradually returning to its normal course, and even the memory of Emily seemed to be fading, though it had not completely disappeared. Could he forget the one on whom so much of his life depended? The one who had shone a bright star on a gray, humdrum life. How much I have learned since I met Emily, learned what love is, and what betrayal is, what pain is. And also during this time, had time to get married, to become a father, to learn what is not love. Learn to live without love, only with responsibilities. How hard can it be? But nothing is harder than being separated from Emily. Will she never, ever be in my life again? I can't bear it, I promise you. The unhappy man in love suffered. He knew perfectly well that he would survive. He had already survived it once, and this time he would manage somehow, and perhaps he would meet her again, and maybe even more than once. Christmas was approaching, the first such holiday for children who were about to turn a year old. They decided to celebrate it at Abigail's mother's house. She was ill and couldn't come, so they couldn't leave her alone for the holidays. First thing in the morning, Harry took his wife and mother and children to his mother-in-law's house and returned home to grab some dishes they had prepared, but did not take at once. Left alone in the empty apartment, he sat down by the table, pulled out his cell phone. A couple of miracles, if fairy tales and soap operas were to be believed. No word from Emily, of course. She hadn't answered her phone in months, and she wouldn't now. She could have at least texted for the holiday. Congratulations, happiness in your personal life, but no. Why don't you dial her number yourself? So Harry decided to do it, and he did. Oh my gosh! The phone was answered. The world's most precious voice answered. Hello, Harry, is that you? Who else, Emily? Where are you, tell me? I can't go on without you. I'll go mad without you, understand? He shouted, almost sobbing with happiness. And I'm here, I'm in town. Harry, why don't we meet? I'm staying at a hotel now. I've got a room. As if nothing had happened, Emily said. Tell me the address. I'll be there in a minute, please, but don't disappear again. I'll be right there. My darling, my only one. Forgetting that they were waiting for him at his mother-in-law's house, that he had to bring some more salads, Harry jumped out of the apartment to run, drive, fly to meet his beloved. At some point, though, he pulled out his phone, quickly typed a message, and sent it to his wife. It's all right. Don't wait, urgent business. How Abigail would understand these words, he was not interested. Let her understand as she wants or understand nothing. That was not the main thing for him now. He was on his way to meet the woman he loved, the only one in his life, and they would never part again. He would never let go of his Emily, and his hands were shaking so much that he couldn't write anything else to Abigail, but he wanted to write everything, that they were getting divorced, and that he loved someone else. He didn't write, but fine, it was all the same. Why write, we'll have to meet again and say everything in person, and then her mother will tell her if she doesn't understand something. All right, Emily is here. She's not in Turkey anymore, she's at home here. and now I will not let her go anywhere, never and for no reason. He thought, hurrying to Emily's room. Everything would be different now. Everything would be different, just the way he wanted it to be, just as long as she didn't go anywhere else. Emily opened the door for him, still as fresh, beautiful, loved. "Emily, I beg you, tell me, what do you want? What are you missing?" "Anything. Just don't disappear again. Don't ever disappear. I'll do anything for you. Do you believe me?" From the doorway he shouted. Emily was silent and slightly bowed her head, looking at Harry with a smile in which perhaps there was deceit and betrayal, but there was also love, and for that, anything could be forgiven. "Come on, Harry. New Year's Eve is coming. Let's celebrate it properly, shall we?" Without answering, the girl said. Her gaze, the sound of her favorite voice was freezing. Harry hugged his beloved, kissed her, felt her kiss back. Only close to midnight did he come to his senses, edge of consciousness. Harry heard his phone ringing. He realized that his family was worried, hurt, perhaps angry with him, but what did it matter when he was near his beloved? Absolutely none, and there was nothing to answer him, not to his mother, not to his wife. "Oh, Harry, it'll be Christmas soon. Let's order dinner, champagne, something else. It's a holiday. You can't just sit around all night. It's good not to sit around, but we won't be satisfied with love alone." The menu was next to the phone. They ordered what they needed. "I wish that we would never part." Harry made a wish, piously believing it would come true. It was unknown what Emily had wished for, but they spent the night together and were happier than ever. Harry's phone rang a few more times, then went silent, and the next day the fairy tale began to crumble. Emily informed him that she had to go back to Istanbul. "Why?" "Don't go, darling, but I'm telling you, I can't live without you." "Please stay, but not forever, not until spring." "I can't stay, Harry. I've been offered a job there that I'll never get here, and I'll never get money like that. So there's no way I can stay, you know. I love you. I need you. But I'm sorry. Why don't you come to my place?" "I'll come, but I have a job here, and what will I do there? Begging? Sit on your neck? Okay, I'll think of something. I'll talk to you. We'll find you a job." Emily spoke coldly, businesslike. "Pack your things. Look, my whole life is out there right now, and my life is you. I can't stay without you, Emily. I can't live without you. Please stay." Harry begged. "My darling, my only one." The girl softened. "I'm sorry, but I can't go back to the store. I can't rent an apartment here. I can't stand this cold. I can't live without sunshine for 6 months. I can't even do it for you, you know. That's why I'm telling you to get your affairs in order and come back." "Emily, I haven't given up hope, Harry." "Well, Emily, all you think about is yourself. Can't you live?" "I was getting angry, Emily. You've had a great life. You've married and had children, and your career's on the upswing, and now you want to have a mistress at your fingertips? That's convenient, and how I'm going to live my life doesn't interest you. I'm telling you I'll get divorced, we'll live together. You won't work at all, but you didn't get divorced, and you share the apartment with your mother, and I won't live with her. And from your paycheck, deduct child support for the 2 kids, your wife, and maybe your mother. What's left for the 2 of us? Harry, don't hold me up. I'm gonna miss my plane. You can walk me out if you want, but without the wailing." Harry drove his beloved to the airport. He was so depressed that not that wailing, words could not say. At least don't disappear, stay in touch. That's all he asked. "I'll think of something, I'll be there. We'll be together, I promise." Emily promised not to disappear, said goodbye and left, as if vanishing into thin air. It was time for Harry to go home to his family, and he didn't know how to explain his act. What his wife and mother would say was irrelevant. Emily had left. That's what was terrible, and all the others were still there. They wouldn't go anywhere. They'd blow up, and that was it. Emily's gone. That's the trouble. And what these people will say or do, who cares? I won't even resist. Harry thought with a grim grin. Miranda was the first to arrive. "Merry Christmas," she said dryly. "What are you going to tell me about your adventures?" "I won't tell you anything, Mom." Harry sank tiredly onto the bench in the hallway. "You can make something up if you want to." "I haven't made anything up, and I don't want to tell the truth." "Is Abigail in?" "Well, it doesn't take a genius imagination. It's clear without your explanation." "Abigail, you say? Where else would she be? Or were you hoping she'd gone?" "I wasn't hoping for anything." "Let's not talk about it. I'm exhausted, really." "Poor guy, he's exhausted. Are you going to sit in the hallway?" "Well, sit there. What can I do?" Her mother went to her room, and Abigail came out of their bedroom, pale, puffy-eyed, with a drooping face. Harry felt an acute pang of pity for his wife, a sense of irredeemable guilt for her. "Abigail, I'm sorry." He slid off the bench, knelt, and tried to grab Abigail's hand. "I'm sorry. I don't know how it happened." "Don't." She pulled Abigail's hand away. "I don't need anything else. I don't have time." And left for the kitchen without even glancing at her kneeling, bowed husband. He sighed, got up, wandered into the room. Well, everything at home seems to have turned out all right. The mother, of course, expressed her ewe, but even in a lighter form than one might have feared. The wife, but apparently decided to kill with contempt, which is also not the worst option. The pity and guilt somehow subsided. Abigail, to all appearances, didn't really care, that is, when he didn't come and didn't answer his calls. She was probably worried, concerned. Maybe she tried on the role of a widow, but now her husband is back. He is alive, healthy, at home, so everything is normal. If she were really dissatisfied, that is, insulted, offended, killed by his actions, would have left, would have filed for divorce. Well, or scandal raised a real scandal, with breaking dishes, tears, violent explanations, and this, nothing else is not necessary. Well, do not need and please, he is also not going to explain or apologize for the rest of his life. He will live and live as before, waiting for his beloved. He won't disappear for the third time. It didn't work out so well before Christmas. Mostly because of his mother, who looked at her son with contempt, pressed her lips together, refused to eat with everyone, and hissed something judgmental. Abigail also withdrew at first, talking little, that is, almost never communicated with Harry at all. It was hard to live in such an environment, especially since there was such an icing of relatives on Christmas vacation. Even at work, there was no escape from such a harsh atmosphere. If the women wanted to punish Harry in this way, and to get some special apology from him, they miscalculated. The more his wife and mother turned away from him, the further he himself became estranged from them. He liked walking, though the weather was not favorable for it, but he was sick of sitting at home. Besides, there was always the possibility that Emily would call, and he would not talk to her in front of his own people. But she did not call, and she answered Harry's calls very seldom, referring to her work, but she did answer, and was so affectionate, so sweet in these short conversations. That's what a real woman should be like, and for me it was Emily who was perfect. And Abigail, what? She's a fish, she doesn't live, and she won't let me. I should get a divorce and go to Istanbul to my one and only, already a free man. He thought so, but he did not do anything yet, and did not even talk to his wife about divorce. It's not that he was afraid, it's just that he had 2 one-year-old children. Do they divorce people like that? In any case, there will be talk, and here all is conspired to praise Abigail. That is, she and before everyone loved her, talking about what she is nice good, but somehow it was not conspicuous. But now you stick your nose out the door, and some neighbor girl will jump in like a tick. How's Abigail? She's so wonderful. When I see her, I'm in such a good mood. Well, God bless her. Say hello. I went to work, same song. How's your wife? You're lucky. You found the perfect wife. It's like someone's got everyone talking about Abigail. Well, you should have had her. Harry thought with annoyance. Who'd want her with 2 kids? She wasn't much use to anyone without them. Not only did the constant talk about Abigail spoil his mood, but also the fact that Emily wasn't calling him, and she was answering his calls less and less often. The conversations were getting shorter, and in the background I kept hearing music, cheerful voices. Was our reunion being delayed for a reason? If they intercept my Emily, what then? I had to make a decision. I was also constrained by the fact that there was not much money, at least for the first time they were necessary, and then we'll see. It was unbearable to keep everything inside, but there was no one to talk to. Only Mason, a close friend, he dared to say everything that had boiled up in his soul. Mason lived alone, in a rather large apartment, left by his parents, and Harry at one time even had a desire to rent a room from him, to live separately from his own, but did not dare. Mason was his own man in their house, had been friends with Miranda for a long time, and even seemed to have a fondness for Abigail. He never showed it, though. He was always correct, remembering that she was his friend's wife, but he couldn't bear it now. So Harry decided to pour out his soul to his only friend. I've put the car on sale, and I can get a lot for it, but I have some savings left. I'm going to Istanbul. I can't go on without her, my Emily. Are you crazy? What about your family? Mason was surprised. What about family, Mason? I am superfluous there, in my present condition, you know. I can't look at my mother or my wife. Even my children are a burden. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. What am I supposed to forgive? I'm not judging you, but you're doing something bad. Aren't you ashamed? I'm ashamed, but not ashamed because I'm sad. I can't go on living like this. Harry was sure he was right. Then why did you get married? To have kids. How will you look them in the eyes later? Mason realized that he couldn't talk his friend out of it, but he felt so sorry for Abigail and the babies. I think they'll understand. Anyway, when they grow up, I'll tell them this: never give up on your love. Never settle for less. That may be the best advice they'll ever get. However you get it. No, Harry, I'm not moralizing to you. I'm not a priest. I'm not a teacher. If you want to go, go. I just want to say one thing. Are you sure you're not going to blow it with your love again? How many times has your Emily deceived you? Not again, I hope. And you know, Mason, her deception is worth more to me than any right. And you really don't have to lecture me. I'm not hurting anyone. The kids are young, and Abigail doesn't seem to care if I'm here or not. Look, if you want to go, go, but don't get too cheap. No, I do business with reliable people. They won't cheat. Harry left without understanding his friend's words, without heeding his advice. Mason thought gloomily about how lucky some people were, and how the lucky ones did not appreciate their good fortune. Why should he have such luck, he asked. The love of the best woman, who gave birth to 2 wonderful children, and he breaks away and goes where? To some hussy who doesn't want to know him. Yes, Mason had a thing for Abigail, But she was the wife of an old friend, therefore unavailable under any circumstances. And now, even if Harry doesn't get divorced, which he won't, he would come to Istanbul, see what the beautiful Emily was doing there, and return home with nothing. And Abigail would probably take him in. Harry started packing at home, not really thinking about what he would say to his wife. Mumbled something about a business trip. "Is that so?" said Abigail. "For how long? But how do I know how things will work out? I'll text you or call you. If things go well and the business trip lasts longer, can I consider myself a free woman?" "What are you talking about?" Harry asked unhappily. Was Abigail starting to realize something? "Do you still think I'm a homely clod who can't see beyond diapers and pots and pans? But the truth is, I see and I understand. I know you married me while loving someone else. I thought a life together would make a difference, but you're leaving, you're disappearing. How long do I have to put up with this? I know you sold the car knowing you weren't going on any business trips. Who put that in your ear? Your mother, I suppose, or some of the sympathizers who feel sorry for Saint Abigail. Well, listen to them, listen to them. No one blows me anything, on the contrary, everyone tries to assure me that you are a wonderful husband and family man, and you would be like that if it weren't for all this. I understand everything, even why you're lying to me, why you won't come clean and divorce me." Abigail's voice sounded sad, but without tears. She was not going to cry or make a scandal. "And why is that?" Harry asked. "It's very simple. You don't know how your favorite woman will take you. Maybe it will not work out with her, and then you can safely return home, where you will always be waiting for a plate of food and your own woman in bed. Don't be silly. I'm traveling for work, no women. Stop making up nonsense. I'll go and come back. I don't know how long I'll be there. And don't get on my nerves. I want to leave before my mother gets back, or she'll start giving me a hard time. Go on, there's no hurry to get home." Abigail grinned. Harry really didn't delay, took his things, kissed his children, kissed his wife on the cheek, and left without waiting for his mother. He was glad of such good fortune. Miranda would not have been delicate, would have said everything she thought about his business trips, or maybe she'd try to keep her son. That's what she told her daughter-in-law when she got home from work. "What do you mean he's gone?" "Where? Why? What business trips? Why did you let him go, Abigail?" "What could I do?" "Lie across the door? Get down on my feet?" "I still have my dignity. I put up with it because I loved him and hoped he'd love me back, but I guess he didn't. I'll file for divorce, and in the meantime, I'll probably move in with my kids. What are you doing? Why would you do that?" Now Miranda was ready to lay across the door, terrified. "What will I do without you, without grandchildren? What are you doing? My son's away. I don't know if he'll be back. Are you going to leave too?" "No, Abigail, don't leave me." The women hugged each other and decided not to part. Abigail was left to live with her mother-in-law. They had been on the best of terms from the first, and Harry's behavior did not affect it at all. Of course, it wasn't easy for them. Both of them were tied up with taking care of children who had already started walking and were very restless. Neither Miranda nor Abigail had a car, and neither had a license, so they sometimes resorted to the help of Mason, who, after the departure of a friend and the news that Abigail filed for divorce, began to visit them, to provide the necessary assistance, to play with the children, whom he sincerely loved. He was in no hurry to explain himself to Abigail, for he feared that she was still suffering because of Harry's deed, from whom he had heard very little and no news of any substance. Harry arrived in Istanbul and went straight to the hotel where Emily, according to her, worked at the information desk. On the day he checked in, there was a different, unfamiliar girl at the desk who didn't answer any questions about Emily, but that didn't bother the young man very much because his beloved might have had a day off. However, she didn't show up the next day and the third. The hotel was luxurious, and it cost a lot to stay in it, and although Harry had money, it might run out, and he could not wait for new arrivals. After waiting for Emily to appear and despairing of seeing her, Harry decided to spend the evening in the bar, just to sit and drink, to get rid of his longing for Emily for a while. It was there, in this hot spot, that he saw his one and only half undress it. She was wriggling around a gleaming pole, stripping. She was as good as ever, but that wasn't what struck Harry. It was the sight of a dozen drunken men devouring her with their eyes, whistling, applauding, encouraging the girl to get rid of the rest of her toiletries. When Emily finished her dance, Harry moved toward her, but the road was blocked by two large security guards. It would be unwise to confront them. Harry decided to wait until the end of his beloved's work evening. He habitually took up his post at the service exit, hoping to intercept Emily. Staying in the hall, where she walked almost naked between the tables, exposed to everyone's lustful gaze, was unbearable. It was a long wait, but when Emily finally came out, Harry rushed to her. "My dear, are you here? I've come to see you." Emily, not expecting such a meeting, did not express much joy. "Yes, I'm here. Where did you come from?" "Why?" Unexpectedly, the girl was confused. "I told you I'd come. I can't do it without you. We'll always be together, won't we? I've left everyone, my mother, my wife, my children. I don't need anyone but you. And you, why are you in this bar?" He asked me in a confused way. "I dance here. I'm a stripper. Does that embarrass you?" Emily regained her fun, playful mood. "A stripper is not a prostitute. If that makes you uncomfortable, I'm not sleeping with anyone. We're not even allowed to have personal contact with visitors. And where are you staying?" "This hotel. Will you invite me to your place? I'm tired and hungry, to be honest. Dancing is a lot of work, but you can give it up if we're together, can't you?" "I'd do anything for you, anything to make you happy." "Well, we'll see if I should quit my job." Emily cheered as she made her way to Harry's room. "You've made some money, haven't you?" "Yeah, well, you've never been poor or greedy. I'm glad you came, honestly. I missed you. Always thinking about that crazy Christmas night. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hugs, kisses later, place your order. Let's pick something not too heavy together. I have to watch my figure." Yes, Emily's figure was in perfect shape. She became even more slender, flexible, and her acrobatic caresses drove Harry crazy. He realized he could hardly go home to his wife and children. Finally, about his beloved, with the God-given woman herself, and let her be a stripper if she liked it. Let all the men look at her, drool and die of envy for the one she is alone with every day. And he, well, yes, he'll be jealous, but Emily is no Abigail. There'll never be peace with her. And someday they will come home, live as a family, and no one will stop them from being happy. The happiness lasted for 6 months, then Harry ran out of money, and with it his love for Emily. Harry began to hint that it would be a good idea to return home to a place where he could earn money and provide Emily with the lifestyle she needed. Back home. Back to you. My home is here, Harry. I've got work here. I've got money. I've got fame. And what's out there? But I told you, I'll work, I'll provide for you. With what? Vegetables to make soup, laundry detergent to wash your socks. You see, darling, I'm used to all this squalor. I can't stand the thought of this house. No, don't ask me. I'm never going back there. But what are we going to live on? I've got nothing left, and I can't get a job at my social status. So come back, Harry. They're waiting for you at home. You won't be homeless. You won't be unemployed. Don't go whining about how you can't do it without me, and you love me and all that. I've heard it, but I've never seen it done. Well, I've seen things that don't make a man look good. You betray your own too easily. Will you betray me too? Emily, if I betrayed, it was only for your sake, and to betray you, my beloved, how can you imagine such a thing? Exclaimed Harry, wringing his hands. I can imagine it very easily, darling. Yes, you sort of love me now, but only because I haven't turned into a pet chicken. The minute you see me in a kitchen apron and old slippers, you'll start looking for another ideal. Don't shake your head. That's just the way it's going to be. Emily waved her hands in the air. You won't walk around in slippers. We'll have a housekeeper, a cook, whatever you want, promised Harry. I was surprised at how pragmatic his beloved, who had seemed a model of carelessness and frivolity, had suddenly become. The housekeeper? I'd have to pick up her slippers, and you'd have to finish your lunches. How much is your salary? What's your alimony? What are we gonna use to rent an apartment? Or are you thinking of throwing your family out on the street? Or is your mommy gonna welcome me with open arms? Harry, come back here and get some perspective on real life. Emily, but what about then? What do we do, tell me? Harry felt a cold sweat run down his back. What kind of us? What kind of us? Wake up, there is no us. There's you with your problems and me with mine. I'm staying here because I don't see any other option. I suggest you go home and live a normal life. That seems to be the only option too. And mind you, darling, I make a good living, but I'm not going to support you. I haven't gotten to the point where I can pay men yet. It was the end of all hope. Harry still tried to persuade his beloved to leave, tried to find a way to stay in Turkey, but both these options were equally unrealizable. Realizing that he had no money left, only for the return trip, he began to pack, to Emily's great joy and relief. Don't you love me at all? Have you ever loved me? She asked him goodbye. I have. I loved a strong man who could do something, not a whiner begging for love. We had a wonderful time, we were happy, but I can't offer you anything else, I'm sorry. Harry flew home with a heavy heart, so heavy that he feared the plane would collapse under these reveries. He didn't know what he would say to his wife, how his mother would greet him. However, he cared little about that. He had parted from Emily, and probably forever. His hometown greeted him with overcast weather, a fine cold rain. It was as if nature, too, wanted to aggravate his despondency. He entered the apartment, empty and apparently for days. Where had everyone gone? Though it delayed an explanation, it was troubling. Dialed Abigail's number, no answer. The phone was either dead or turned off. Called my mom. Miranda answered right away, but her voice was so foreign and cold. Harry, where are you? I'm home, Mom. Where are you? Where's Abigail and the kids? Where did you all disappear to? We're not in the habit of disappearing. I'm in a sanitarium until the end of the month, and when I get back, I'd hate to have you home. Abigail? I don't know, but I don't think she'll be very happy to see you either. I'm sorry, I have to go to my treatments. Wow, his mother gave up on him. His wife probably didn't either. He didn't have his mother-in-law's number, nor did he want to go to her. Abigail might be there, but he didn't want to talk to her in front of witnesses. Neither did being in an empty apartment. He went out, wandering at first without purpose, but then he saw the house where Mason lived. He decided to visit his friend, to find out how things were going at work, and maybe he knew about the changes in his family. Turns out he did. Abigail and the kids were at Mason's house. It was a real family idyll. Mason and the kids were playing on the floor. Abigail was sitting next to him. Not many people paid much attention to Harry's appearance. "Abigail, I'm back. Why are you here?" he asked his wife. "Because I'm with Mason now." Calm as ever, Abigail replied. "I filed for divorce." You betrayed me?" Harry couldn't believe what was happening. "Consider it so, if it makes you feel better. Mason has been more of a father to our kids than you have been in 6 months. Go away, Harry. We don't want to see you." What was there to do? Harry came home without lighting a light, sat in the empty, uncozy, and cold room. That was it. The beloved abandoned, the mother turned away, the wife gone. What's left? Loneliness.
Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana Smith was one of those girls who in Soviet times would have been described as a Komsomol girl, a student, an athlete, and simply beautiful. But since Adriana was born a year after the collapse of the Soviet Union, any Komsomol was out of the question. Everything else was pure truth. The girl studied at the psychological faculty of the university, respected sports, and not just respected, and in her free time went to the gym and conquered guys with her gorgeous figure and exquisite beauty. Her green, slightly slanted eyes put on associations with the witches Rusalka and Undina, and her waist-length golden brown hair completed the impression. There was no shortage of admirers, but the heart of the young beauty was taken in the first year of university. Its happy owner was James, a law student. The guy was a year older. Excuse me, can you tell me where the third bakery is?" He heard the melodious voice of a beautiful freshman one day and realized he was lost. "Come on, I'll show you," James offered with a smile, and the girl nodded gratefully. On the way to the bakery, young people met, and the same day realized that they were made for each other. After receiving his diploma, James got a job at the tax office. The salary was impressive, and the young specialist thought about making Adriana an offer. And why not? After all, after a year, James was already on his feet and therefore could provide for his family. "I will propose when James gets his diploma." He shared his plans with his parents, and they quite approved of his son's decision. They were fine with Adriana. "She's not a bride. She's a miracle," said Betty, James's mother. "She's a clever girl and a beauty and a good housekeeper. Don't you dare miss her." "I'm not going to," replied the son with a smile. It was done. Adriana received her diploma, and James made the girl an offer, which she gladly accepted. The young employee of the tax service decided not to save money on the wedding. The celebration was fun, crowded, and very beautiful. It seemed that there would be a lot of happiness ahead, but life often presents surprises, which, unfortunately, are not always pleasant. No matter how many spouses tried to conceive a child, they did not succeed. James and Adriana bypassed a lot of doctors, but all to no avail. The young woman became depressed. "Don't worry, kitten," James said. "I love you. And that's the most important thing. The rest will come." But then a lot of women have changed when they've lost all sense of Christina. So as long as we're alive, not all is lost. "Yes," Adriana smiled weakly. "You're probably right." She tried not to despair, but apparently she wasn't trying hard enough. One day, after another failed attempt to get pregnant, she'd snapped at James for the first time, even though she couldn't blame him. That night her husband didn't come home for the first time, and then things escalated. Adriana had no time to look back, and the spouses' sleepovers outside the house became a regular occurrence. In 3 months, Adriana came home and found in the marital bed a pretty blonde girl. It was a girl, because the latter is unlikely to have marked the age of majority too young. About such usually say young as early. Once Adriana sincerely thought that such situations are possible only in bad anecdotes, but not in life. Turns out she was wrong. No, she didn't make a jealous scene. Why humiliate herself? Oh no, that's not Adriana Smith. She just turned around and went back to her parents' house. A week later, James stood on her parents' doorstep. "I'm sorry," he said, handing Adriana a bouquet of tulips. "I don't know if I can," she replied, looking thoughtfully at her husband. "You try." Barely audible, James said. God knows she tried to appear calm, but she couldn't hold back the tears. Her husband held Adriana close to him and stroked her hair. Sha, it's okay." That same day, Adriana returned to James. The family idyll lasted exactly a month. That is, until Adriana, returning from work, accidentally saw her husband with her good acquaintance. James and Christina were sitting in a cafe holding hands. Adriana was tempted to run to the cafe. Yeah, and pulling Christina's hair. Yeah, and just as long as it didn't hurt. But after a minute, Adriana thought, no, we'll go another way. That evening, when they were both home, she said without offense that she'd seen the whole thing. Adriana had subconsciously hoped that James would say that it had been a chance encounter and purely friendly. But nothing of the sort had happened. "Yes," her husband replied with a sigh. "I should have told you about it earlier. Christina and I love each other." "How long have you had this?" asked the young woman, Drogba in your voice. "Not long," shrugged James. "What difference does it make? Really no sobbing. And I don't remember myself running out into the street." And then there was a divorce with all the ensuing consequences in the form of the division of the apartment, the division of property, and the news of Christina's pregnancy. That was a low blow. "Calm down. You're gonna be fine." Adriana's friend Kathy tried to talk some sense into Adriana. "With such a beauty, you will not be alone for long." But Adriana just shook her head. She didn't believe anyone else. And in the back of her mind, somewhere in the very bottom of her mind, Christina glimmered that James would come back. But he'd forgotten all about Adriana. Her classmate Clara, who was not particularly tactful, said that James and Christina are happy, walking through the park, holding hands. "And your ex was like a faithful dog," pouring it all over her face. Holding hands, she thought. Just like that time in the cafe. And out loud she said, "Slaga, I'm sorry, but I'm not interested." Adriana worked as a school psychologist, but now she felt like a cobbler without boots. She herself needed the help of a specialist. So the principal suggested that Adriana take a week off. The young woman gladly accepted the offer. She went to the base where she walked a lot and read books. Of course, men tried to court her, but Adriana only guffawed. What's in store for the prince? The week flew by like a day. On the way back to the city, Adriana feared she'd be depressed again, but she didn't. She went back to work. Life went on as usual, and it seemed like an early start to life. But one day Adriana was walking down the street and saw Christina with a stroller. The young woman became hysterical. She sat down on a bench and began to scream. "Are you sick?" a man asked her sympathetically, about 25 years old. "I think so," nodded Adriana. "Only you don't have to worry about that." But why didn't the young man agree, handing her a small bottle of mineral water? We're all human. Sometimes it's good to talk it out. And a stranger would be better for that purpose than a best friend. Adriana remembered how Clara had poured salt on her wound. That was when she realized that the young man's words had some merit. Adriana also realized that she really needed to talk. After all, her friends didn't really care about her problems. But then, why should a strange man care about them? Well, he offered himself as a shoulder to cry on. "By the way, my name is William." The man introduced himself with a smile. Adriana trustingly, she smiled back. "So what is your problem, Adriana?" William asked softly. It's just hard to imagine that such a beautiful girl could have serious problems. She could, she sighed, and told her sad story. "What can I say?" The young man waved his hands. We all walk under God, and no one knows what will happen tomorrow, the day after tomorrow in a week. There is no need to despair. And your husband? Well then, that's not the man you were going to get along with. Maybe, Adriana nodded. But to be honest, it doesn't make me feel any better. Time heals, William shrugged and winked. You know what you need right now. And what's to get drunk? I'm sorry, get drunk what? Repeated the new acquaintance. Actually, I don't drink. So I laughed too, he laughed. But there's a first time for everything, isn't there? So let's go to the bar. A toast to getting to know each other. Let's go. She made up her mind. That day, Adriana drank herself into oblivion for the first time. And the next morning, she woke up in her own apartment, realizing that someone was lying next to her. The young woman cried out. It was William. What are we doing up? Fun, he asked, opening his eyes. I'm that. And you and I are what? William gave a funny shout, and a second later, Adriana laughed infectiously. But actually, last night at the bar, we got into a you versus me thing. Yeah, not really, she mumbled embarrassedly. But we did. The young woman was silent, and William said seriously, Adriana, we are adults. What happened is what happened. But if you're so uncomfortable, I can leave, and you'll never see me again. Adriana was silent. She suddenly realized that I didn't want to. I must admit that William turned out to be an attentive and interesting conversationalist. And most importantly, it was much easier in his company. According to William, he was a freelancer, but when asked what he does, William answered a little bit of everything. Sometimes I work with advertising agencies, repair cars, phones, and stuff like that. I see, nodded Adriana. A few months later, William proposed to Adriana. They signed without witnesses and other wedding tinsel. And then they moved on to married life. This time, the absence of children did not bother Adriana too much. Either she had gotten over her desire to be a mother, or she had the impression that William did not pay any attention to it. But the fact remained. Sometimes Adriana wondered how much William would be enough. She waited for her husband to talk about children, but it never happened. What happened was much worse. One day, Adriana came home from work and found the young woman in her kitchen. And you pardon me, who was taken aback, Adriana? And I smiled, stranger. Camille. I mean, it's a pleasure. My name is Adriana. You must be related to William. Yeah, I guess I am. Camille nodded. I didn't see you at the wedding. Adriana said, I wasn't there, but I'm going to live here now. Didn't William say he was planning to file for divorce? Are you kidding? Adriana exclaimed. Camille shrugged her shoulders. You get a divorce, and I'll live here with William. What do you mean here? This is my apartment. But my Lochka was yours, and now she's ours, grinned the intruders. Do you want to see the papers? Adriana already sensed something wrong, but she said please. And when Adriana saw the document, according to which the apartment now belongs to William, her eyes went black. It was nothing more than a deed of gift. Based on its contents, it appeared that Adriana had given her apartment as a gift. You see, Camille said triumphantly, William's apartment, and you have almost no rights to it. I say almost, because it's a matter of time. Are you all lying? Shouted Adriana. This document is a fake. I'm going to call Yura now. Yes, please, sniggered the rival. And hearing the rattle of the key in the keyhole, added, and here, by the way, he is, so no need to call anyone. But I see you've already met him, said William with a wicked smile. And Adriana realized with horror that everything this Camille had said was true. William, what does that mean? She demanded an explanation. It means, my dear, that you are nobody in this apartment, and your name is nothing. I'm filing for divorce, and Camille will live here now. Well, I think she's already filled you in on that. But for what? Adriana whispered. Tears welled up in her eyes. Why not? William shrugged. You want to live. You've got to get your head around it. And if you don't want to be evicted from here with the police, You'd better pack your things and vacate the premises. And I'm still your wife." "Squeezing it out like that," nodded the husband. "But it's a matter of 1 month. Will it make any difference?" "I guess not. This is my woman, and you're not here." And smirked added, "Or do you want to be the third? I didn't know you were such a drag. What kind of scumbag are you?" Adriana shook her head. "But that's just the way it is." The young woman realized she had nothing more to do here. She went to pack her things, but then William remarked approvingly, "I always knew you were a smart girl." Adriana packed her suitcase and left the apartment. But where to go? Her parents were so happy that after the divorce, which had not been easy for their daughter, she had managed to organize her personal life and finally become a victim of a con artist. And where to go? Adriana thought feverishly. The young woman sat on a bench and caught the pitying glances of people passing by. She looked very unhappy indeed. The young woman wanted to forget from her longing. Adriana went to Kathy, who lived nearby. "Did you go to the police?" asked her friend. "No," she shook her head. "I hadn't thought about it. And you should have. The document seems to be authentic." Adriana said in despair, "That's not a fact. In any case, it should be checked. Here's the thing. You, of course, cried. But go to the police tomorrow morning." "I'll do that." A visit to the police turned up nothing. What can I say? The officer, whose name was Noah, "You've just been scammed out of your apartment. I figured that out without you," Adriana said sadly. "But what to do? The document can be checked for authenticity." "Of course it's important," said the policeman. "But for that, we need a warrant. What's the problem?" The young woman started to get agitated. "And you do not yell at me, or you get involved with the wrong people. And then you tell us how to do our jobs." "I'm sorry." Adriana decided it was better not to make the policeman angry, or God forbid, he'd refuse to take the case. "What's the big deal?" He waved his hand. "So that's that. Now I'll give you some pictures of marriage and apartment swindlers. What if your husband is among them?" The policeman laid out some photos in front of the young woman. "Is that him?" Adriana exclaimed. "That's William." "Are you sure?" "Well, you know, I lived with this man for a year. The thing is, this man is known to us," as Charles told the policeman. "You're not the first person he's dumped on an apartment, are you?" "And what's with the dropped voice?" asked Adriana. "What are my chances of getting my apartment back?" "We'll try to do our best," Noah replied evasively. She just sighed. It sounded, to put it bluntly, not very encouraging. But there was nothing to do. "Come up tomorrow at 10:00, and we hope for an apartment," added Vason. "Well," nodded Adriana and walked out of the office. She was scared to even think that she could be left on the street. Adriana's parents were living in one. She didn't want to embarrass them or even upset them. "So what did the police tell you?" Kathy asked when Adriana got back. "Nothing concrete yet." She sighed and told them about the visit. "Yes, friend. I don't envy you," Kathy said sympathetically. "But let's hope for the best." Let's hope for the best. But the hopes for the future were not realized. The document turned out to be the most authentic, and the policemen could only throw up their hands. "But is there nothing that can be done?" Adriana asked. "Is there no way to prove that I lived here? After all, this apartment was given to me as a result of the exchange after the divorce." "An exchange? Divorce?" grinned Vason. "Not a boring life, citizen. And for the future, I recommend to be more careful in choosing a life partner. And do not get involved with anyone. Everything will be like people." Adriana realized that the police just don't want to spoil the statistics with another case. But maybe there were other ways to get the apartment back. Kathy pondered. "There must be evidence that you and your ex-spouse are exchanging the apartment. Would you just give up?" "Who told you that?" But it didn't turn out to be that simple. Apparently, William Charles was a master con artist. There's a reason this Vason guy said Adriana wasn't his first victim. There was no record of the apartment being exchanged. The deed of gift in William's name was authentic. What was there to do? Only go to her parents and tell them everything. After all, Kathy had a boyfriend, Benjamin, who was looking at the beautiful young lodger with marked interest. Adriana, I understand and sympathize with you, but you have to understand, Kathy said. Yes, I understand, Adriana replied and went to pack her things. But trouble does not come alone. A few days after the young woman moved in with her parents at Sebastian's, her father began severe heart pain, a massive heart attack. The doctor said he could not be saved. And after 40, Sebastian's mom Cindy quietly passed away in her sleep. It's my fault, Adriana lamented. It was because of my problems that Daddy and Mommy were gone. And again, the apartment issue. The one-room apartment where Adriana's parents lived had turned out to be disputed, and she had been asked to leave it. But how come? She asked an employee of the city administration. You see, I have nowhere else to go, and you think it's my problem, arrogantly said a burly middle-aged woman. Then Adriana realized it was a dead end. It couldn't get any worse. The young woman left the apartment and went wherever she was looking. And they were looking nowhere. Adriana had some money left, enough to rent a small house in the private sector, but she decided not to spend it. So the young woman moved into a social hotel for people in difficult life situations. But however she got there, she became a real homeless person. No residence registration, no place of her own. On top of that, Adriana was fired from school. Nothing personal. The principal said, "But I don't want any problem employees." Nice one. The psychologist lives in a social hotel. David, but I need something to live on. The girl said in despair, I'll find something. Fine, he nodded. When you think of something, then come back. I'm sure you won't have any trouble getting a job. Adriana, I'll be perfectly frank. Personally, I like you very much. But there's such a thing as the image of an institution. It's gotten to the point where students are whispering about you. So I'm sure the hotel will take good care of you. You won't starve to death. I heard you, Adriana replied. I won't spoil the image of the school. Have a good day. Having said that, the young woman left. And when she left the principal's office, she really felt the mocking looks of her colleagues and students. God, until when will fate test my strength? Adriana thought sadly. She went back to the hotel and sat down on the flimsy sofa, covering her face with her hands. Adriana thought back to everything. The former husband of the con man William Charles, the check-in at the social hotel, and finally the dismissal. Did something happen to you? Kelly asked, a friend in distress. Kelly was a victim of black realtors. Just like Adriana, she trusted a charming man, and that man threw the young woman out on the street in the winter cold. And if it wasn't for the hotel staff passing by on a raid, Kelly wouldn't be alive anymore. What happened? Adriana asked personally again. Nothing. Except I don't have a place to live, and now I've lost my job. What's a job got to do with it? Because I'm ruining the school's image with my unenviable status. Adriana grinned wryly and told Kelly about her conversation with the principal. Those bastards, she exclaimed. No, Adriana sighed. It's much simpler than that. It's every man for himself. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's true, Kelly nodded. And noticing a strand of hair on Adriana's shoulder, she said, Is your hair coming out? Must be nervous. In the morning, they woke up to screaming, fire, burning. That's all they needed. The smell of burning was getting stronger and stronger, and people were running for the exits. Don't panic, don't panic, the hotel director exhorted the guests. The inn burned to the ground. Now Adriana and the other residents had only one way out. As long as Adriana had money, she lived in a hostel, but that ran out, and the young woman was forced onto the streets. No money, no place to live. The receptionist said, Well, maybe I can do some work. I'm not afraid of any work. We don't practice such things, answered the employee and defiantly began to write something in a notebook. from time to time looking at the screen, standing in front of her laptop. "Well, thank you." Adriana answered with a sigh and headed for the exit. "Wait," the receptionist called out to her. "You say you're not afraid of any job. There's a hospice a block away. Maybe they'll take you there to take care of the sick, for bed and board. See if you can apply there." "Thank you." The young woman nodded and left the table. "I understand and sympathize with you, but the staff is full," said the head of the hospice. "But you have to understand. A psychology degree is good, of course, but we already have a psychologist. We can't help everyone who needs help. After all, this isn't a labor exchange. But maybe I could be a backup." Lyra insisted. There was no choice. "I won't take up much space, and I'm not shy." There was a knock on the door, and the manager said, "Excuse me, we don't need to work." A young and elegantly dressed man entered the office. "Hello, Mason." The superintendent smiled cordially. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Benjamin," with dignity replied Vezet. "I need to talk to you. Are you still here?" The superintendent frowned, looking at the liar. "I think I made myself clear." "I'm sorry," the young woman said quietly and left the office. Adriana took the hallway, wondering if there was another social hotel in town. There was no money on the phone, so she couldn't monitor the city for it. Adriana was already approaching the exit when suddenly she was called by "Wait." The young woman turned around and saw the same young man with whom she met in the office of the head of the hospice. "Are you for me?" she asked. "Yes, you are." The stranger nodded with a smile. "Benjamin said you had a problem." "And who doesn't?" Bitterly, Adriana grinned. "I think I can help you," the man said. "My name is Mason. You've heard, though. Well, I'd like to offer you a live-in job. You want to offer me a job?" The young woman asked in disbelief. "But yes, in general. But I can't pay much. It's a business problem. But food and a roof over my head are all guaranteed." Frankly, it was all too good to be true, and to say I've been burned twice is no joke. Maybe this is the one they're talking about. God loves a trinity. But on the other hand, there were no other options, unless she went to the street, where she actually was now. "What's your name?" Mason asked. "My name is Adriana," answered the young woman. Adriana smiled like a singer. "Well, you could say that." Adriana smiled shyly. "You know what?" Adriana winked. "Mason, you're much prettier, really." The young woman was embarrassed. She had already forgotten that men happened to compliment women. For her, it was somewhere else in her life. "So how about my proposal?" asked Mason. "But you didn't tell me what I should do." Adriana pointed out reasonably. "Oh yes, I'm sorry. And the thing you were trying to get hospice care for. My mother needs a caregiver, but first I would ask you to tell me what happened to you." The young woman was uncomfortable telling the story of being the victim of a con artist, so Adriana confined herself to the story of divorce, the loss of her parents, and the recognition of their housing as disputed. "Well, I think I can help you," Longman said, after listening to her story. Unlike most divorced women of the Soviet era, Betty Longman was not the least bit complex about it. She would never live with a man on the principle that he was not good, but mine. She was more familiar with the principle that it was better to starve than to eat anything. After studying for a year and a half with an alcoholic with criminal tendencies, Betty showed Ivan the door, and then she did not hesitate to file for divorce. She later learned that her ex-brother-in-law had gone to jail for burglary. "I just shrugged my shoulders, and I shouldn't have raised my son." And the rest of it was such a load of crap. Betty worked as a dispatcher at the trolley park. The pay wasn't bad, but you can't have too much money, especially if you're a divorced woman with a child. And the young woman took a second job as a hospital nurse. The young mother was exhausted, but she knew that the little mommy would not need anything. Betty cared not that the child was fed, clothed, shoe, but also about his leisure time. From the first grade, Mason went to 2 sports sections on swimming and basketball. Later, the boy became interested in chess, and of course, his mother did not neglect his computer literacy. The boy grew up erudite and well-rounded, and Betty was happy about it. Besides, she was proud of the fact that Mason Longman was a good-looking guy and enjoyed success among the girls. Betty didn't skimp on her son's entertainment either. "Mom, but this is the most expensive nightclub," shook his head when Betty presented him with flyers for his 16th birthday, a concert by a popular band. "So, is it fun?" asked his mother. "We live once, and you had fun." "It's kind of shameful," replied the guy. "You work, live and work hard, and I have fun." "Well, when to do it, if not when you're young?" Betty objected. Some of the relatives and friends of the family had told Ethan that, "Look, don't let it get you down." But it didn't. When it came time to think about education, Mason said that he decided to enter the Faculty of Economics. "In the future, I want to devote my life to business," he explained his choice. "The competition is crazy," Betty remarked. "Mother, do you really doubt me?" "No," the woman shrugged. "But as far as I know, to get into the economics department, you need goodwill and a lot of money." "Mom, I've already thought about it," Mason said. "I'm gonna work part-time." "And where are you going to work part-time?" Betty chuckled. "Where will they take you?" "I've already been hired," he smiled. "At a restaurant as a waiter." "Oh, come on. That's the truth. And if I have time, I'll work as a promoter or a courier. I could use a part-time job right now." "Well, part-time work only strongly, not overwork," with a sigh, said the mother, automatically taking hold of the heart. The mother, frightened, asked Mason, "Are you feeling okay?" Yes, I'm fine." Right. Mason got a job as a waiter. It paid well, plus tips. The day ended when the last customer left, which sometimes went past 0 o'clock. After such shifts, Mason needed a truly Herculean effort not to fall asleep for lessons. On Saturdays and Sundays, he worked part-time as a promoter or handed out publications of an advertising nature. It was hard as hell, but the thought of studying economics and then becoming a businessman warmed his soul. Some people said that you don't have to study for 5 years to be a businessman. "Listen to a course on the basics of entrepreneurship and all that," said Liam's school friend Mason. "No, I want to study everything thoroughly, not grab the top." Shook his head at me. Liam, grandiose plans. 5 years of being a student flew by much faster than it seemed to Mason at first. The boy faithfully attended all lectures, took an active part in seminars and colloquiums, but he couldn't wait to get a diploma and make the first steps in business. Sometimes Mason thought that Liam was probably right, and such difficulties were really unnecessary. He knew a lot of double majors who started earning good money almost after school. However, being a perfectionist, the guy wanted everything to be, as he put it, by his wits. And here he is, a young economist, full of the most daring plans, proudly shows his mother a red diploma. "What am I going to say?" Betty smiled. "Well done, and you deserve encouragement. What do you want?" "I'm a mom. I just want to get rich and take you to a fancy restaurant." "No more, no less." Humorist. The parent laughed. "I'm more serious than ever. This will be the best encouragement." There was no money to start my own business. Therefore, the first pressing issue was employment. For a whole month, Mason went around to organizations, but in vain. "We need a candidate with experience in the field," he answered, in 10 companies. The remaining 2 promised to call him. Eventually, Mason managed to get a job at a young grocery company, and his business took off. As soon as management had the opportunity to pay employees more, they didn't fail to do so. After a year, Mason decided to go freelance. "I'm sorry to part with you," Kevin said as he signed the application. "It was a pleasure working with you, too," Mason replied sincerely. "But I've been dreaming of my own business since high school." "Well, may it work out for you," nodded the now ex-boss. "What are you going to do, if it's no secret?" "No, it's no secret. I'm gonna open a real estate agency." "Oh, really?" Kevin said respectfully. "I think so too," smiled Mason. "And if you need to buy, sell, or exchange real estate, I'd be happy to help. I will, laughed the manager. And good luck. Thank you. And you too, Longman replied, after which the men exchanged a firm handshake. Amcor Real Estate Agency started to turn a profit after a couple of months. Of course, it was a long way from fabulous wealth. But Mason had every reason to be proud of himself. He'd made it. And what was to come? On the day of his mother's 45th birthday, Mason handed her a luxurious bouquet of dark pink roses and said, "Mom, now we'll buy you the most gorgeous evening dress we can find. And tonight we're going to a nice restaurant. How about that?" "Oh, Mason, but that would be expensive," Betty said. "Why don't we cook something at home? We'll have guests over, and remember what you once said to me in response to a similar phrase." With a laugh he asked, "That we only live once. So we go to a restaurant and don't argue with me." "Thank goodness I can afford it now." They went to an expensive boutique and bought for Betty a stunning dress, sparkling with trips of cobalt blue and beautifully revealing her slender figure. And in the evening, mother and son went to a cozy country restaurant and sat gloriously. "Promise to take you out to a restaurant at least twice a year on your birthday." And on March 8th solemnly said the son, "Do you want to spoil me?" With a laugh asked Betty, touched by her son's words. "That's exactly what Mason confirmed. You used to spoil me. Now it's my turn." The agency still fed Mason and his staff heartily, but it wasn't enough for him. So Longman started thinking about opening a new branch, and he succeeded. "Mason," Betty said at dinner one night, "I was talking to Aunt Bailey today, and she asked if you could find some work for her, Michael." At the mention of his cousin, Mason snorted incredulously. How long had he remembered Michael? He'd always wanted easy money. After high school, Mason's cousin had enrolled in a technical school to study software engineering. Michael reasoned that programmers made good money. What is his truth? Except that Michael forgot about one thing. In order to earn this very good money, you must first learn and start working. As a result, Michael was expelled after the first session, and then the failed programmer tried to earn money. However, the ways of earning money did not inspire confidence and looked more like fraud. "What are you doing all this fooling around?" Mason once said, "Try to get back into tech, or go somewhere else. But there's no easy money in it." But Michael wasn't interested in any reasonable arguments. He wanted it all. "Fortune is fickle," shrugged his cousin. "One day there is none, and the next day there will be." "Why wouldn't they?" Mason asked reasonably. "One should be able to wait admonitively," Michael replied. And then word got out that he'd started gambling. The guy had money, and Michael said to Mason, "Well, I told you, Vital. Even an amateur like me knows that you get a beginner hooked on winning first, and once they get the hang of it, they start losing." Mason grinned mirthfully. "Why not?" Michael objected. "If you think with your head, everything will be fine." And soon Mason's prediction came true. Michael owed a large sum to some criminal authority, and the guy was in serious trouble. Aunt Valia, Betty's sister, came to her nephew and banged at his feet. "Spells help a brother. I won't survive if anything happens to him." Mason helped. What's there to do? What's the ritual? He generously lent the money, noting that it was time to start earning his own money. And now, a year after this story, Michael seems ripe or desperate to find a magical way to make serious money. "Can you think of anything?" Betty asked. "Probably," Mason replied after a little thought. "But I can't guarantee fabulous money. He's got no education, no skills. And have him come back tomorrow morning." To be honest, he didn't really believe Michael would come. But he did, and he miraculously agreed to take the office manager's job. Mason had no idea what it would cost him to help him get his cousin hired. To Mason's surprise, Michael faithfully performed the duties of office manager. Growing up, Longman noted. And a few months later, Mason went to his personal account to pay the tax and whizzed out of the company's accounts more than half of the amount to pay the tax, of course enough. But what to do next? It was supposed that all available assets would be used for the development of the branch and some needs of the head office, and there was no money. Mason refused to believe it, but the truth was obvious. The missing money was clearly Michael's doing. Had he really started gambling again? Depressed, Longman thought and dialed the receptionist's number. "Katya, would you be so kind as to get Michael for me?" "Okay," Mason shouted the receptionist. Michael came up about 10 minutes later. "What's the matter?" he asked. "Charles, is there something you want to tell me?" It was obvious from his cousin's face that he wanted to lie that he didn't understand anything. So Mason decided to take the bull by the horns. Don't let him think that being related gives Michael the right to do whatever he wants. He wants to work for his health. No, so he's Mason. He's not holding anyone back. "Michael, are you playing with metal in your voice again?" he asked. "I'm not." "But you're the one who took most of the money out of the accounts," Mason interrupted. "Did you owe someone again?" Michael fell silent, slurring. "Is that what you needed this job for?" Longman stated, "You know, I can forgive anything but stealing from my own. That's called fatherland. After all, if you had a problem, you could have told me about it instead of hacking into the computer to steal company money. So now you're going to fire me." Mason nodded. "I'm sorry, brother, but I can't trust you." A few days later, a police officer visited the office. Longman Mason asked the employee upon entering his office. "Yes, that's me," politely replied the office owner. "What can I do for you?" "We've received a report that a company is running an apartment scam," said the police officer. "What is this nonsense?" Mason exclaimed. "My company has an impeccable reputation. We've been through a lot of transactions. Yes, you should read the reviews about our firm on the internet. There's never been a scam." "We'll take care of it," said the law enforcement officer. "You'll have to come with us." "But I cannot," Mason said in desperation. "I have a meeting with a client in 20 minutes. "I don't think so." The policeman grinned. "The company's office will be sealed until the circumstances are clarified." The next 2 weeks were a living hell. Mason was shown several documents according to which people were transferring housing to other people. The papers were authentic and drawn up in the office of the real estate agency Comcor. Mason couldn't help but realize that apartment scams, like theft, were the work of a cousin. I should have known what he needed the job for. He berated himself. But what's the use? The important thing now was not to go to jail. Betty's health left a lot to be desired. And who but Mason would take care of her? Longman's lawyer had done a good job. He managed to get a logical forensics count, and Mason's signature was found to be forged. He was eventually released on his own recognizance. As for Michael, he lay low, and therefore it was not possible to attract him. And where's the obvious evidence of his guilt? Anyway, Mason's firm lost its sterling reputation. Clients became noticeably less, and one day Mason was forced to declare bankruptcy. It could have been worse. Mr. Longman is alive, well and free. The rest will follow. Except Mom. No matter how hard Mason tried to hide his problems from Betty, she found out. All things secret, as you know, come to light. And the earth is full of rumors. But how could it be? Her mother said in a stricken voice. "He's your brother." "Unfortunately, Mom," Mason replied with a bitter smile. "For some people, nothing is sacred. I can't get my head around it. Just a poor woman." Betty took what happened to her son too personally and became ill. She had trouble walking, talking, and caring for herself. That's why it didn't require a caregiver. Mason still had some money to spare and hired a caregiver from an agency. 3 months, he figured. And then, God willing, I'd find a decent job. Mason, as a young man who used to work as a courier promoter, he did not mind unloading railcars offered in the store as a loader. As for more monetary and stable work, her search has not yielded any results. The story of the scandal in Odessa real estate office flew all over the city, and no one wanted to deal with Mason. He was very much on the wrong side of the throat. Young but promising businessman. Maybe some of his old contacts knew Mason was innocent. But such acquaintances either did not want to compromise themselves in the eyes of other representatives of the business community, or did not want Longman, once a strong competitor, to rise from its knees. Victoria, whom Mason was dating at the time, stopped returning his calls, and because she said she loved money. She did, said Betty, who had always disliked Vika. She loves money, said Betty, who always disliked Vika. Money was running low and bursting. Rich realized that next month he would have nothing to pay the caregivers with. Betty, meanwhile, was quietly fading away, and the doctors only spread their hands. The result of severe stress, in one voice, said, plus not very healthy heart. The main thing is to regularly take the prescribed drugs of calmness and observe bed rest, but also appropriate care. Here, the appropriate care came into question. After all, it required an investment, and they needed something to eat as well. Mason feverishly considered his options and finally came up with one. He decided to contact the hospice, which supervised. Perhaps Benjamin will match him with a specialist who will agree to work for a moderate fee, food and a roof over his head. He was helping us, wasn't he? But Benjamin seemed to think otherwise. Oh, really? The hospice director exclaimed. I hire highly qualified people. My staff won't work for less than that. Benjamin tore off the sticker and wrote the amount for which he said his subordinates were willing to work. Mason couldn't afford it, but we can't say his trip to the hospice was in vain. You know what? Exclaimed the master of the office. Did you see from me? Now the lady was coming out of her pocket and remembered the young woman whom Benjamin had apparently turned away. And I nodded. She offered me her services for food and a corner, said the superintendent. I don't have any vacancies. The woman is in a difficult situation. And anyway, if you are interested, you can catch up with her and offer her a job. Thank you, Mason replied, and quickly walked out of the office, thinking that with mercy at the staff of hospices and other similar places is tight. However, if you think hard enough, you can hardly blame them for that. Police officers, ritualists, surgeons, and many others touch human grief almost every day. It's their job. And if you sympathize with everyone, it won't last long. But Longman has helped so much with this hospice that the superintendents could have come up with some variant for him. Although, in fact, he only came up with one if it was worthwhile. Mason was lucky. The young woman Benjamin was talking about hadn't left yet. And when Longman called out to her and the stranger turned around, he realized that this girl needed help. Her eyes were so beautiful, but so sad, it made the former owner of the real estate office's heart ache. But first, the business part of the conversation. The negotiations had taken place. Mason and her mother lived in a small but very nice cottage. Adriana entered the house and immediately felt like pinching herself. Am I really going to live in this house? The young woman thought, not believing her happiness. Let me show you to your room first, Mason suggested. And then I'll introduce you to your mom. Okay, Mason nodded to Adriana. It's just Mason, he smiled. I'm not that old. Adriana just shrugged. The room she'd be staying in was sunny and bright, cozy and spacious, especially after the social hotel in Hosta. Adriana thought with a sigh, just what will happen next? Will it be my destiny to wander around in other people's houses from now on? Do you like it? Asked the owner of the cottage. Yes, Adriana nodded, wondering if he was joking. It was clear that a man who had asked for hospice care would be happy in any conditions. A room on the second floor of the cottage was something she couldn't even dream of. Well, that's fine, Mason smiled. Perhaps you'd like a bath. I wouldn't say no, the young woman muttered embarrassedly. The baths are down the hall, said the employer unexpectedly, and added in a changing tone after the engagement, I can offer only a man's robe. Thank you. Adriana nodded with a shy smile. When was the last time I had such a luxurious bath? I thought. The young woman inhaled the scent of strawberries with pleasure. A long time ago in another life. Just like this, in another life. And what will this life be like? Let's hope that this time I'll do well. God willing, everything will work out. The water is already cold. But Adriana didn't seem to notice. She was having such a good time. But remembering why she was here, Adriana reluctantly finished her water treatment and, putting on her robe, left the bathroom. She hesitantly stopped in the middle of the hall, not knowing where to go next to her room. But Adriana would have to meet her ward. Yes, but she needed to change her clothes. So the dress Adriana was wearing was filthy, and frankly, smelled of sweat as she stood helplessly wondering where to move. Mason's lightly steamed footsteps were heard on the stairs. He said with a smile, "Thank you," Adriana replied. "Now we will eat and get to know the ward," Mason said cheerfully and explained we will eat in her room. "But let's go." Mason's mother turned out to be a thin and probably once very attractive woman. She had a kind, warm, and sincere smile. Looking at Adriana's mother, I wanted to believe that she would not be deceived in this house. What could I take from her? Adriana grinned to herself. "Well, welcome," said the woman in an affectionate and melodious voice weakened by illness. "My name is Betty Adriana." She smiled. Mother Mason was just over 50. If it weren't for the fine lines around her eyes and the corners of her lips, she might have been 40, if not less. Her long golden blonde hair, touched with gray. The woman had spent an hour pulling her hair back and putting it up high. But unlike many of Betty's peers, her hairstyle was not outdated in the slightest. "That's what Adriana," the ward said quietly. "May I call you that?" Adriana nodded. Betty said, "So Adriana, in this house, are you a guest?" Yes, and don't look at me." "So Mason told me that you were in a difficult situation, and it would be sacrilege to invite you here as a servant." Adriana looked at Mason confused, and he nodded. Yes, that's right. You'll be more of a companion to Mama than a caregiver." "Adriana, what about your sense of humor?" "Your sense of humor?" "I don't know what to say," the young woman said thoughtfully. 4 years ago, I would have said that I have a great sense of humor. I'm a psychologist by training. But now, the psychologist was a little surprised at Mason. "Yes," she sighed. "And worked in your specialty." "Worked," nodded Adriana. "In another life, you're right." Longman suddenly smiled, winked at her. It was indeed in another life. "And do you know why?" "Because there's a new life waiting for you now. And it's going to be better than the old one." "You don't believe me." And Adriana believed him for some reason. "Adriana, you know what I've been thinking?" Asked Mason at breakfast. Betty was still asleep, and they had breakfast in the kitchen. Adriana raised her head and looked at him questioningly. "You will be my mother's personal psychologist," Mason said. "Does she need a psychologist?" Adriana asked. "We all need a psychologist from time to time," Longman said thoughtfully, clearly thinking about something else. Mason was going to deliver the next batch of advertising papers and was dressed very democratically, a t-shirt and a tracksuit. Adriana remembered Longman talking about business problems, but didn't dare to ask what he was doing. Mason had been forced to sell this car because of debts and now walked to the office, thinking that the bus courier's job came in handy. In addition, the bicycle provided by the advertising agency is also not bad, and for health and fun, thought Mason. He always knew how to find a plus in everything. "Hello, Julia," greeted Mason, the employee of the advertising agency. "Are you as charming as always?" "Thank you." Mason smiled at the girl. It's nice to hear a compliment early in the morning, and even from such an interesting man. "It's not a compliment, but the truth." Longman smiled. Julia was indeed a marvel. "How good?" A petite brunette of about 23, with sly brown eyes and long lashes. "Still nice." "Not without coquetry," replied the employee and proceeded to work matters. "Here are your newspapers. Have a good working day." "Thank you." Mason put a pile of advertising newspapers on the trunk and rolled towards the front of the work entrusted to him. On the way to the station, the former businessman thought about the nurse he'd brought into the house to care for his mother. More precisely, about the personal psychologist. And to be perfectly honest, Mason did not see Adriana as an employee. Adriana was undoubtedly very beautiful. Mason, of course, had no way of knowing what the young woman had looked like before she'd found herself in her predicament. But she seemed to be in Adriana's favor. She had her passport with her, and Longman knew that Lilia was 27, a year younger than himself. No, Adriana didn't look older than her age, although in her position that would make sense. It was just that those stunning green eyes seemed to belong to a woman in her 40s, if not older. The eyes of a wise and damaged woman. That was the definition that came to Mason's mind. Generally, the former owner of real estate agencies would prefer a caregiver in the age of years, so it is from 45. But in his situation, he didn't have to choose. As long as she was clean and responsible, Mason decided, and rushed to catch up with the girl. Adriana made quite a positive impression on Longman, and her psychology degree was a plus. Suddenly, Mason realized he wanted to do something nice for Adriana. Only this. As he thought about it, he almost missed the right street and mentally chuckled. Hadn't you fallen in love with Longman and remembered that airplanes came first? And the girls. Then Mason went about his cursory duties. "Betty, what can I make you for breakfast?" Adriana asked with a smile. "Don't fuss," the girl said affectionately to her mentee, and then realized, "Oh, it's okay that I'm on a first-name basis. It's okay. So what can I make?" Coffee and a couple of cheese sandwiches would be quite enough. With a slight wave of her hand, Betty replied, "And let's go to my place for a chat." Adriana replied well, and went into the kitchen. "Adriana, I hope we haven't offended you in any way?" the landlady asked with genuine concern. "Not at all, no," Adriana exclaimed. "You just saved me. You gave me a roof over my head." "No work," Betty objected. "Are you our guest?" "Why should I be? It's not like I'm related to you." "No relation," the woman nodded. "But sometimes relatives are worse than strangers. There was a story in our family that got Mason into business trouble. But Mason will tell you about that, if he wants to, of course." "Well, Adriana, unfortunately, kinship doesn't matter. Let's not be sad." "Adriana, yes, I realize, of course, that the Mason robe suits you, but maybe we can find you something from my closet." "Oh, this is so uncomfortable." "What else?" "Betty, it's much more comfortable than walking around the house in a man's robe." And the woman laughed merrily. Adriana jumped in, and within a minute they were laughing until they cried. "So let's get to the makeover," Betty winked, getting out of bed. "Oh, I'm getting a little dizzy." "So maybe later?" Adriana asked fearfully. No, it's okay," the employer's mother reassured her. "I'll just sit for a few minutes, and the check and everything will be fine." In the end, Adriana became the owner of a pretty soft blue polka dot dress, sewn from goat-like cotton blouse with a floral brand in bed colors, a pair of summer skirts, and a long robe of fine silk. "Well, that's quite a change," Betty said approvingly as the young woman put on the blouse and skirt. "You're a fashionista, aren't you?" Adriana said with a smile. "Of course, Mason often spoiled me with beautiful clothes," she answered in a satisfied voice, and with a sigh, she added when he had the chance. "Well, God willing, things will work out for him," Betty said the young woman. "You don't think? I can do a lot of things, and I'm willing to do all the cooking in the house, clean the windows, wash." Adriana jokingly wagged his finger at Betty. "I said you're our guest first. We'll figure out the rest as we go along." When Mason finished delivering the ads, he went to the office, and then it hit him. Why didn't I think of that before? He chastised himself as he drove up to the store that sold clothes. Adriana had nothing to wear. He remembered, unassuming, most likely issued in a social hotel dress, Adriana, and sighed heavily. What a pleasure it would have been for him to put her in his Puget right now and drive her to the boutique. But, alas, the blessed times when Mason could afford it were behind him. "And this one you drop," sternly, he ordered himself. "What are your years? You're not even a day old. And you'll still have that kind of decadence. In the meantime, girls, my dear, "How much does a dress like this cost?" Longman asked the two young saleswomen, taking off his sunglasses. No matter how much Mason convinced himself that there's no such thing as a bad job, and the most important thing is that there is. The former entrepreneur was desperately afraid someone would recognize him. No, Longman wasn't a snob. After all, he wasn't a rich hare himself. Still, his pride prevented him from showing himself to his acquaintances, especially those in the business community, as a courier and other low-level characters. However, this store was on the outskirts of town, and the risk of being there was minimal. Mason was willing to bet that it was zero. One of the girls mentioned the price of a pretty white dress, and Mason calculated whether his present earnings would be enough for a couple of such dresses, and when he realized that it would be enough, and that there would be some left over, he said cheerfully, "Well, fine, let's do it this way. I'll come and get the money in half an hour. In the meantime, you calm this down. And this one. Are you sure you're coming?" asked the second saleswoman. Mason smiled. "Nice guy," she said. "Yes, his girlfriend is lucky," replied her partner. "Not rich, but he's like a stone wall behind him. You know, I think he's got all the riches ahead of him. Today our store, and there. And then, look, and to an expensive boutique is not far away." Mason was pleasantly surprised to see his mother and Adriana chatting and smiling at each other in the gazebo. For the last month, Betty had not gone outside, only stared out the window. Summer was just coming into its own, and it was still a little chilly in the morning, so her mother threw a poncho over her shoulders. Many of the women were carefully covered with light plaid. Betty's cheeks flushed. She hung back, looking better, and Mason thought of her and Adriana's meeting at the hospice. Nothing short of a gift of fate. "I'm back," cheerfully, he announced. And then Longman's gaze fell on Adriana. She was wearing the skirt and blouse he had bought from his mother in Thailand. "She's much prettier than I thought," Mason thought in amazement. Suddenly, he felt like a classicist giving a chocolate bar to a girl he liked for the first time. "How was your day?" "Fun," he asked. "Just great," Betty exclaimed. "And we got a little dressed up." "Well done," Mason nodded with a smile. Adriana thought, looking at them, that such a mother-son relationship was rare. She remembered her first husband. James had undoubtedly loved his mother, but there was still no such reverent regard for her. The mother of her second husband, Adriana, did not know. William, that is, Charles, or whoever it was, said she was dead. But was that really the case? Adriana waved her head, shaking it away from her thoughts of who was responsible for all her troubles. "What's wrong?" Mason asked. No, everything's fine," the young woman assured him. "Adriana, and I have a small gift for you," smiled Longman, taking out of the bag. "Oh, really? You shouldn't have." Adriana was embarrassed, realizing that it was probably clothes. "It was very much worth it," he said firmly. "You have to wear something, don't you? But I'm here to take care of your mother. Why on earth would you give me gifts? She doesn't trust men." Betty sadly realized and decided to take matters into her own hands. "Adriana, I understand that you are uncomfortable accepting gifts from a man you know," she said, "but you can accept these things against a future paycheck." "But of course," Mason exclaimed gratefully, looking at his mother. "Well, if so," nodded Adriana. "That's settled," summarized Betty. "Now let's go to lunch, Mason." "Adriana, and I made these patties. They're delicious. She's a magician." "I want some," smiled my son. "Let's go." "What's the point?" A week passed. The atmosphere in the Mason house was improving day by day, and it couldn't be happier. This girl was a ray of light for us, Mason thought one day. And that word fit Adriana like no other. Betty was alive and seemed to be on the mend. The house was always filled with good food and exemplary cleanliness. Sometimes Mason felt like Adriana was a member of the family. He thought about her a lot in general, until he finally realized he was in love. "Adriana, I think I like you," said Betty once. "What makes you say that?" "Adriana, "These things don't happen for some reason," said the mentee, who had become a real friend to Adriana over the days. "I am Mason's mom, and I can feel his every mood. You can't fool a mother's heart. When you have children of your own, you'll realize that." Adriana sighed heavily at the mention of children. After all, that was essentially where it had all started. Or had it? After all, James had turned out to be a philanderer. So whether they had a child or not wouldn't change anything. Sooner or later, his nature would come out. One way or another, it happened the way it did. Adriana, and she woke up thinking, "I probably shouldn't have mentioned it," Betty said thoughtfully. "It's all right, isn't it?" the woman asked incredulously. Adriana nodded, smiled, and squeezed Betty's hand, whispering, "Really?" The girl's lyrics were broken by the cheerful voice of Mason. "Why don't we have a picnic, Chuck? The weather is marvelous. The soul is in need of a party. And there's an occasion." "What's the occasion?" Mother inquired. "I got a bonus today," he boasted. "So it's a good idea." "Isn't that a great idea?" Betty said approvingly. "Adriana, what do you think?" "I like it too," the young woman smiled. "But then I'm off to the store for wine and meat." "Adriana, how do you feel about wine?" They'd already switched to you, and each was pleased to note that it was more comfortable that way. "Wine? I don't know, honestly. I'm not a wine drinker. But I wouldn't say no to a good glass of wine. No one offers you a bad one." Longman laughed. Mason returned half an hour later with 2 rather weighty bags of food, besides 2 bottles of red wine, and he had already bought huge pink tomatoes, cucumbers, greens, cherries, and a bunch of bananas for the marinated pork kebabs. "Wow!" exclaimed Betty. "Mason's having a worldwide feast. Well, the whole world can wait. But for 2 lovely ladies, I'd be delighted." While Mason grilled kebab vetua cut vegetables, and Adriana closed the table in the gazebo, the young woman suddenly had a strange feeling that they were family. What was it that made her very confused? It even seemed to Adriana that Mason and his mother might be eavesdropping on her thoughts. It would cross her mind, wouldn't it? She chided herself. "Who am I to them as a servant? And just plain bad people." "The shish kebab is ready," Mason reported to the ceremony, and the women sat down at the table. They ate the bottom kebab, the aroma of which spread throughout the neighborhood, drinking wine and chatting about all sorts of things, and really looked like a friendly, cheerful family. After the 3rd glass, Vetua said, "I think I'll go." "Wow, I'll walk you out." Adriana perked up and took the woman under her arm and led her into the house. "Vetua, maybe I should stay with you," Adriana suggested. No, Adriana. I'm just tired of sitting around. I'd just like to take a nap. I'll be as good as new. You go sit with Mason and socialize." "All right," the young woman replied. "But if you need anything, be sure to call." "Promise." "I promise," Vetua smiled weakly. "Go on, girl, you could use a little fun." "Mason too." Adriana left the room, and Betty looked at her and smiled at her thoughts. "Is everything okay?" Mason asked when Adriana returned to the gazebo. "Your mom says she's just a little tired," she said. Longman nodded and said field wine to himself and Adriana. Mom, how much she's been stretching for me for as long as I can remember her. All she did was fight to make sure I had everything I needed to have a normal childhood. Can you imagine? My mom worked 2 jobs, never went on vacation, took monetary compensation, and ended up compromising her health. I'm glad I had the opportunity to pamper my mom. When she turned 45, I took my mom to a restaurant. You should have seen her eyes. Mom looked at me like I had given her the whole world, and it was worth it." Adriana listened without interrupting and thought what wonderful people they were and how lucky I was to have met them. Once again, she thought. "Great," she said aloud, smiling with just her eyes. "Too bad. I didn't have that opportunity. My parents left so early, and while they were alive, I had problems. I'm really sorry." With sincere regret, answered Mason, and suddenly covered Adriana's hand lying on the table with her own. But you know what I think? Right now, your parents are looking down from heaven and are happy that your life is getting better. I'm sure you're going to be fine. Let's drink to that." They drank and clinked glasses on high stems. "You know, I was set up by my own cousin." With sadness in his voice, Mason said, "Is there such a thing?" "It happens," he sighed. "In fact, that's why I got in trouble in business, and in a big way. But never mind. As they say, we'll live. We won't die. And the world is full of opportunities. We'll fight for our place in the sun. Adriana, why don't we take a little walk around the village? It's very beautiful here now." "I don't know if that's comfortable." The young woman hesitated. "What if Betty needs something?" "What's the phone for?" "Yeah, we won't go far. We'll walk around the neighborhood and back." "All right." Adriana gave up. She suddenly felt like going for a walk herself. "I'll just check on Betty." "Okay," Mason replied with a smile, touched by such reverence for their mother. The street was beginning to blow its nose, and Adriana felt a little awkward walking under the arm of a handsome young man, as if they were a couple in love. They reached the huge oak trees. Beside the trees ran grass and bells. Adriana suddenly thought they were tinkling. "When my mom and I first moved to the village, I used to love to come here and listen to the sound of those oaks," Mason said. "It's really beautiful here." Adriana nodded with a smile. "But your eyes are much more beautiful," he said quietly, and put his arm around her waist and began to kiss her, first timidly and tenderly, then more and more insistently. "Adriana," he whispered. "Adriana, Adriana." The young woman, frozen stiff at first, then resolutely wrapped his arms around Mason's neck. It wasn't even a kiss, but a protest of two ravenous people against this cruel and merciless world. They penetrated each other, but it seemed to both of them that no, not close enough. "I'm not letting you go anywhere." Longman whispered hotly, "I really need you." Now Mason realized this was the woman he had been waiting for, and if Adriana suddenly wanted to leave, he would hold her by force. Mason knew that for sure. They should be together. "Mason, don't," Adriana said quietly but firmly. "It's not right." "But why?" "I think we need to get to know each other better. And I think we already know each other enough," Longman whispered, taking her hand. "There haven't been many women in my life. And do you know why? Because I've never been the type of man to go through the motions looking for the one. I only look at the ones I see as my woman. And now I know I found her." Adriana caught every word Mason said, and she wanted so badly to believe that everything he said was true. 2 failed relationships hadn't gone unrewarded. But better to do it and regret it than not to do it, and then regret it for the rest of your life. Adriana remembered the famous saying and trustingly nestled into the pocket, suddenly feeling like a kitten who found a master after a long wandering. The next day was a day off. Therefore, Mason did not need to go anywhere. At breakfast, Betty glanced furtively at her son and Adriana, and noticing the happy faces of both thought, "Lord, make these two be together." "Mom, I need to tell you something." Mason smiled. Adriana's eyes widened. Betty mentally thanked the Almighty. It looked like what she had dreamed of was becoming a reality. "Anyway, Adriana and I love each other," Mason said. "Is that true?" Betty exclaimed. "God, Mason. Yes, it's the most wonderful news I've heard in over a year. My children, I'm so happy for you." "Adriana, what about you?" The young woman couldn't say a word with excitement. "Betty, it's true," Adriana replied with an embarrassed smile. "I love Mason." "Well, that's great. I think this case should be celebrated." "Mason, Adriana, maybe we should make a celebratory dinner." "Why?" My son smiled. "Could we? What do you think?" "Why not?" "Well, that's great," summed up the happy mother. The festive dinner was lively. Mason joked a lot, laughed a lot, and gallantly courted his girls, as he called his mother and his favorite woman. Betty couldn't remember the last time she had seen her son so happy. "I wish they were doing well," the woman thought. After all, They both deserved it. 3 months passed. September was cold. But Mason and Adriana were warmed by their love and the anticipation of happiness. It couldn't be otherwise. 2 weeks ago, Mason brought a valuable package to the office of a young company, and the man sitting in the chair exclaimed in amazement, "You're Mason Longman." Mason was confused. He had already forgotten about his former, but belonging to the business crowd. He was terribly embarrassed to appear before a businessman in such a disadvantageous position. But it had already happened. "Yes, it's me," he admitted. "You have no idea how long I've been looking for you," said the owner of the office, shaking his hand as he stood up sharply from his desk. The young man was hardly more than 25 years old, and to Mason's amazement, he looked at the courier as if he were a celestial. "In short, I need a man like you," the man said more slowly and very seriously. "I, Jacob, am the head of this company. We are engaged in manufacture of doors and windows." "Interesting." "He's still asking," thought Mason, who had given up hope of catching on to any possibility. "Well, yes, he did," Mason replied discreetly. "But doesn't it bother you that no company has wanted to do business with me in the last year?" "Oh, come on," Jacob said cheerfully. "Anyone who is aware of the situation knows where it comes from. Besides, you know, in business as in war, if you don't do it, you do it. And if someone has slipped into a puddle and can't get up, only 1 out of 10 will lend a helping hand." Mason thought with a sad chuckle. Yes, the count was in the tens. On the whole, however, he liked Jacob. He reminded Mason of himself at the beginning of his career. Longman suddenly remembered Jacob, whom he respected as a man and as a professional. So this kid is his son. Well, a worthy successor. Jacob offered Mason a cold juice, after which the men, without delay, discussed the details of cooperation. It had proved fruitful, thanks in large part to Longman. "I'm proud of you," Adriana said when she heard that her lover was back in the fold. "I always knew you would do well," Betty exclaimed, hugging her son. The lovers sat in the restaurant waiting for their order. Mason never tired of admiring Adriana. In the last 3 months, she had gotten prettier. Adriana had a striking appearance, so she hardly used makeup. A little mascara, eyeliner, lipstick, gloss, peach new color of her luxurious brown, and hair Adriana tucked into a high hairstyle and decorated with studs with rhinestones. A diamond like that needs a luxurious setting, Mason thought, looking at her with the loving eyes of a caregiver. But isn't he an idiot? Though, admittedly, she did her job as a nurse with an A+. That's right, that's right. Betty was on the mend, and there was no hint of ill health, and the offer of cooperation Mason regarded as the final chord in the series of troubles. However, that was not all. For Adriana also found a job. Now she is in office, a manager almost by specialty. After all, communicating with people implies a knowledge of psychology. The waiter brought some kind of cold dessert, on top of which an intricate composition of strawberries or mint pomes was painted. "Try it," smiled Mason. "I'm not much of a dessert person, as you know. You, on the other hand, have a sweet tooth." Deliciously approved. Adriana pinch off in desserts with a spoon a piece of mass, resembling not then news, not then ice cream. "And it's beautiful to eat. It's pathetic. But you eat it." The young woman stabbed, and for dessert on a fork, a berry and whisked. Under one of the juicy berries was a wedding ring. "What do you think?" Adriana nodded, and the young woman's eyes sparkled. "Aren't you forgetting something?" asked Mason. "No, I haven't forgotten," Adriana laughed. "Mason, for God's sake. This is the 10th time you've asked me that. It's just that I'm a very much in love young man," raised a finger in the air, and grabbing the new bride in an armful, began to kiss. "Don't mess up my hair," Adriana jokingly pleaded. During their banter, Mason's purse and all its contents fell at their feet. Adriana said with a laugh, "And someone's going to ask me for my passport. Where's yours?" "My bad," said the happy groom-to-be. "Now I will correct this oversight." Mason's cell phone rang, and he answered it, and whispered to Adriana, not as a favor, but as a friend. Please come up to my office. My passport is in the top drawer. Adriana ran up the stairs with a smile, thinking that the image of a businessman suits Mason very well. He's cool, she thought lovingly. Adriana opened the top drawer of Mason's desk. Suddenly, her gaze fell on a document lying on the desk. Actually, not even a document, but a stamp with a picture of an apartment and the inscription Realtor Agency Maker. It seemed to the young woman that she had definitely seen this seal, and the name of the company is familiar to her painfully. And no wonder, because it was thanks to the firm that Adriana had become homeless. Oh God, she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. What is this? Further, Adriana was afraid to think. The truth was obvious. What to think now? She thought frantically. I won't be able to look him in the eye. Though who should be ashamed of him or me? When Adriana came downstairs, Mason was still on the phone. He smiled at the sight of Adriana, but when she threw at his face the passport and document found on the table, I ran my eyes fearfully. Excuse me, I'll call you back in a couple minutes, said he to the caller, and rushed off after Adriana late. When Longman ran outside, his favorite woman was already getting into a cab. At that moment, Mason berated himself for buying a house next to a parking lot. What was the use? He was more interested in another question. What fly had bitten Adriana? Apparently, it was the title deed to the apartment of one of the firm's longtime clients. She needed a certificate, and the woman's representative had gone out to Mason. Mason sank powerlessly onto the couch. He seemed to realize what the matter was. After all, Adriana had said that her parents' housing had been found to be in dispute. She probably thought the name of my agency sounded familiar. Did Michael have something to do with this? Jacob, I have a favor to ask of you, he said as soon as he stepped into Jacob's office. Then, 2 weeks ago, Jacob asked Mason to become a partner. And the best part was that they had become friends. What's the matter? Jacob asked. Mason, is something wrong? You're not wearing your face. Jacob spoke to Longman, trying to sound calm. I was wondering if you could run me through an old deal. Details later. Mason was strangely thoughtful, looking over the report Jacob had provided. Mason had nothing to do with it at all. Then what's the matter? So did you apply? Betty asked her son, who had returned from work, and noticing the absence of her future daughter-in-law, asked, where is Veroshka? Adriana interrogated the son, wishing to prolong the time. Ah, Adriana. And she went on business. Well, all sorts of wedding troubles. You know. Mason, are you all right? Betty asked cautiously. Something must be abnormal. Mason smiled tautly. Mason, I've known you for over a quarter of a century, said the wise and perceptive woman. And I know your every mood. So you don't have to tell me. Mom, she left quietly, Mason said. That's it, said her mother. But what happened? Just so I know. In despair, he exclaimed, feeling humiliation and terrible shame. Maybe you hurt her in some way. You see, son, sometimes we women get offended, and you men don't understand. What's the matter? Mom, what are you talking about? Mason shook his head. But you've seen me dusting Adriana off. True, I had one thought. But it didn't pan out. What kind of consideration? I told you it didn't work out. But you did. Meanwhile, Adriana sat on a bench at the Walk of Fame and thought, now I won't believe any man. They're all the same. Adriana. She heard a sympathetic female voice. Adriana slowly looked up and saw a pretty, young, expensively dressed woman who didn't immediately recognize Kathy. Standing next to her former classmate was a stroller with a baby in it. Kathy exclaimed in surprise to Adriana, "What a meeting. I see you have a baby married." Kathy lowered her head. "No, that didn't work out. Remember Benjamin, the guy I was dating when Kathy wasn't finished?" But Adriana understood perfectly. Yes, she nodded, "I remember." So sighed the classmate. As soon as he found out I was pregnant, he immediately backed off. Stupid, really stupid, Kathy agreed. He didn't even realize what happiness he was giving up. My daughter is so cute. Yeah, well, that's his problem. How do you look? Fine. By the way, I'm the one who sighed at Adriana. And I'm back on the street. I have a good job, but no roof over my head. That's the way it is. Yeah, Lucky is drowned. You know what? Why don't you come to my place this time? No fools. We'll grieve over a woman's unfortunate fate together. Sounds pessimistic, but there is still no choice, Adriana sadly stated. Churchill. I'm so embarrassed that I asked you out of the apartment guiltily, said the classmate. Don't. Reed shook his head. After all, it's your apartment and your personal life. You fought for your happiness as best you knew how. And whoever remembers old times must be the one who gets the eye. You're a saint, Kathy said thoughtfully. Not at all, said Adriana. It's just that most often a problem makes us look at the situation from a different angle. That's the way you want to look at it. But it's not right, Kathy said thoughtfully, listening to her classmate's story. Is he really such an idiot to put a document on the table and then ask you to bring him a passport? Something doesn't add up. But Adriana shrugged. Maybe he'd forgotten the documents were on the table. Maybe so, nodded Kathy. What's the name of the real estate office? Mason wrinkled his nose. Adriana replied, I'll never forget it. Oh, really? No, that can't be right. It's Mason Longman. Player. Either you've got it wrong, or it's not that simple. Yes, Mason Longman was one of the most honest businessmen. Benjamin knew him well. There's a lot of ambiguity there. And there are rumors that his cousin set him up. Longman's innocence was proven, but the real culprit was never found. Well, I mean, he's known. But to this day, no one knows where he is. Lyra froze. She suddenly remembered how Mason had once blurted out that his cousin had set him up. But of course, that had been on the memorable night when she and Mason had first kissed. So it really wasn't Mason's fault, Adriana thought. Miller, I think you two should talk, Kathy insisted. But you're good too. You ran away without joining forces. Well, what was I supposed to do? Nail him to the wall. I could have done that. At least I'd know the truth. Oh, Kathy, I don't know what to think or believe. Adriana sighed. I don't want to believe it, but it's too simple. And being wrong twice about a man is also, you know. There was a baby crying in the next room, and Kathy went to her daughter. So Adriana said to her classmate about 20 minutes later, like I said, you can live. I got room for everyone. Plus, it's more fun with just the two of us. But personally, I think you should just explain yourself. Yeah, well, I can't advise you on that. You're on your own. A wounded bird. Not true, Adriana thought. Do you have someone to live for? It had been a month since Adriana had moved in with Kathy. The classmate was working remotely. Adriana had quit her job at Mr. Jacobs' firm to take care of the baby. The classmates supported each other as best they could and took turns taking care of the baby. How lucky is she? She thought. She stroked the pads of her fingers, pink, velvety cheeks. After all, she has a child, and I'm not lucky. Kathy had offered a classmate to be Lisa's godmother, and Adriana had been honored. I feel a little dizzy, she said as she walked out of the church and felt nauseous. Maybe it's the smell of incense, the new mom suggested. I get like that sometimes. And Kathy looked at Adriana and noticed you looked pale. Not sick. You know, Kathy, I haven't been feeling well since this morning, she remembered. That's the last time I've ever been sad. Adriana, what else? When was the last time you had one of these cases? Girls, can we get in the car already? The woman, Kathy's mother, pleaded. I'm tired. Me and Lisa squinted. Mom, wait, Kathy waved Kathy away. What do you mean, what business? I don't get it, Adriana. What do you mean, what? Did your friend pull her eyes out? Our once-a-month ladies thing. Wait, what are you saying? That's exactly what I'm saying. Kathy nodded triumphantly. No, Adriana thought for a moment. Of course, I would like it very much, but alas, we have tried for too long, but to no avail. And the doctors did not give any favorable prognosis. Well, my dear, I can name more than one couple who, having already despaired of conceiving, eventually became parents. But why guess? Go to the Women's Health Clinic tomorrow. But let's get in the car. My mom's gonna eat us out of a birthday dinner. Congratulations, Mommy. You're 7 weeks pregnant, smiled a pretty red-headed woman about 35 years old. Are you sure? Adriana asked, confused. It's just that I haven't been able to get pregnant for years. And this? Well, my dear, I've been working for years. I know how to recognize pregnancy. The gynecologist laughed for once. So run along, make your husband a celebratory dinner and tell them the news. Yeah, I will. Oh, thank you. That's a good one. I thought Adriana's marriage wasn't working out. And then there's a relationship that didn't. And here you are. You do realize you owe me an explanation now, don't you? Kathy exclaimed. I'm not one for innuendo. Adriana realized she'd done something stupid, but it was too embarrassing to go to Mason with her tail up and say, "Oh God," and that would make her think I was trying to tie the baby down. Adriana thought with horror. Lyric, you've got it written all over your face, laughed Kathy. I bet. Right now you're thinking about the fact that it's not proper for a decent woman to tie a man to a child. Adriana only grinned. A shrewd friend, she thought. Adriana, answer me one question, yes or no. Do you want to be with Mason? But no, well, yes or no, Kathy reminded her. Yes, Adriana answered and lowered her eyes. That's what you should dance from. And dance how? I mean, what to do? The answer is obvious. Come and repent Mason on. Or rather, find out what's what. Well, if he's guilty, does the fact that he got off somehow mean nothing? Then Mason had money, connections. Red. Honestly, I want to believe in Mason's innocence, but I'm afraid of being fooled again. I don't understand your position, for the life of me. Kathy shook her hands. But even if you suspected him, you could have told him openly. What's the point of leaving in English? I don't even understand it anymore. While I was telling Adriana and Kathy, there's something else. Something else. Yeah, you're a real piece of work. But what have you got? Nothing criminal, I hope. No, I shook my head. Not on my part anyway. Anyway, I hid from Mason that I'd been victimized by a con man. After James, I remarried, and my hubby Igor got me an apartment. He turned out to be a marriage and apartment scammer. Now that's interesting. Something tells me, well, it's worth looking into. I've got an idea. What is it? Adriana's interested. Adriana's later. Kathy was not a woman who was lucky in her personal life. Though which way to look at it? She was flamboyant, spectacular. On her account was a lot of Masonove, including with a rather enviable fiancé, but with a serious relationship as it did not add up. But what cannot be taken away is a crowd of admirers. So why not take advantage of the connections? So where is it so beautiful, if not a secret? Adriana inquired. When Kathy undressed in an exquisite outfit, the color of ripe cherries with an asymmetrical muzzle hem, and one sleeve, concentrated on doing a luxurious makeup. The secret was gone. Kathy, and clutching the scrap, expired sale, hurried to the exit, where a cab was waiting for her. Kevin seduce. Kathy smiled at her beau, who was MIA. I'd like to bring up one not-so-old story. Remember the real estate agency scandal? Kevin and Kathy were sitting in a small, cozy restaurant styled after a hunting lodge. For Kevin, it was a date he'd spend a third of his paycheck on. For Kathy, it was a business meeting. Although how do you look at it? Well, hummed Kevin, who had been long ago and hopelessly in love with Kathy. A very ambiguous case. Yes, and the culprit turned out to be multifarious. This is it, she thought excitedly. I think I'm on the right track. You mean in an innocent voice? Kathy asked. That's what I mean. The suitor smirked, looking at her with loving eyes. Mason Longman was framed by one Michael Macadam, his cousin. But that's not even the point. This same Macadam goes by several first and last names. Bingo, Kevin, I love you. Merlot echoed Kathy and sat up to her admirer and kissed him on the cheek. Kevin bloomed. The next day, Adriana sat in the restaurant waiting for her friend. Kathy was indecently late, and she had already pulled out her phone to call her friend. Hi. She heard an unfamiliar baritone and nodded in surprise. Hi. Complaint about Adriana. And not being able to think of anything better to do, she added. I was expecting Kathy. Kathy will be Kathy, nodded Longman. In the meantime, Mason took out his smartphone and entered the gallery. Adriana, do you know this man? He asked, opening the photo in front of him. I do, stunned. Adriana said, This is William, my second husband. I'm sorry. I didn't tell you that he's the reason I ended up on the street. Why didn't you tell me about him? I was ashamed, she admitted. Ashamed, Mason repeated. In the meantime, if you had told me about it right away. But ideally, you would have mentioned the name of my firm. There wouldn't have been the misunderstanding that happened between us. Yeah, well, whatever. It's just a pigeon. This guy's real name is William Michael Macadam. And he's my cousin, or was he? I have no idea what's happened to him now, or if he's even alive. I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't. With his penchant for adventure and card games, when I reported him to the police, they instantly told me he was also known as Charles Dolgov. Adriana whispered, maybe, smoked, and threw Adriana's cell phone. Notify the owner of the message on Messenger. The young woman smiled. It was a message from Kathy. Don't forget to tell him the important thing. A friend had written. Easy for her to say, Adriana thought. She had to do it anyway, though. Mason. Yes, love my charming. Smiled Longman Rim Things, taking Adriana's hand. There's something I need to tell you. I'm listening to you carefully. I must. Oh my God. I've been looking forward to this. And now this. What's the matter? Mason laughed. You think you were hiding some terrible secret from me. In a way I am. Adriana nodded, and then she blurted out, I'm pregnant. Is it true? Longman exclaimed happily. No, I was joking. The young woman pretended to buy us. Ask me if I'm sure it's your baby. No. Mason laughed. I'm certainly not gonna ask that. I'm as sure of you as I am of myself. Kevin and Kathy approached them. They're in cahoots. Adriana gasped. That's exactly what Trinity laughed back. Don't forget Lenka. You have to catch the bouquet. It's probably the 10th time, Kathy reminded me. Still, if it wasn't for me, there wouldn't be a wedding. You're my Cupid. Adriana smiled, hugging her friend. I remember everything, but to tell you the truth, I don't see the point of it. Kevin has enough on his plate as it is. He's going to propose to you not today, but tomorrow. I don't know, serenely, smiled her friend and part-time witness. But I want everything to be according to tradition. Adriana, I love you. They heard Mason's voice and looked out the window in friendship. Adriana sent an air kiss to her spouse and Mason waved. You know, Kathy said seriously to the happy bride. Mason once told me that from now on, a happy new life awaits me. And he's right. Cheerfully, Kathy continued and winked. But what's forward to the new life? Yes, replied Adriana with a smile. At that moment, the young woman was more confident than ever that all the hard trials were behind her and her life was finally on a white streak. After all, this time, she had the most wonderful man in the world by her side.